I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we got another stormy Thursday evening here in front of us. Approval of the agenda. And must somebody make a motion to approve our agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Sandra, I need a second.
Also,
James, second. Any discussion on the agenda before we go to vote? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Council comments. Sandra, you want to start us off?
I would like to say that Mills River Day was wonderful. There was more people than I've ever seen at Mills River Day. And thank you to Jason and his family and the fire department, the sheriff's department, all the vendors that came and participated, town staff. They did a wonderful job in planning and putting it together, and it was just a good success.
Jeff?
I don't know if now's the time to talk about it, but the project out here on NC 191, should I wait till the business meeting to talk about that or mention it now?
You can mention it now. We got a little bit of a crowd. They might.
So the MPO reached out to me and they would like to reopen the discussion about the configuration of the road out here. Originally it was planned as a 4-lane divided highway with U-turns. It was at the town's request, turned into a 5-lane, and with the suicide lane, which is an appropriate name for that. And the MPO would like to discuss if there's a chance to go back to it being a 4-lane. And, as an engineer, that my primary responsibility as an engineer is safety. And as a council member, and think about the safety of our public and our citizens trying to negotiate a 5-lane out here, I personally am in favor of the 4-lane. If you're trying to pull out, say, out of Mills River Village or River Oak or anywhere along there to cross to, I think about Bojangles when we go get a biscuit and try to pull out of Bojangles. There's times you're not turning left. And, being 60 years old, I'd like to think I have a little judgment built in there. I know when to turn right and go turn around at the next signal. Someone 16 years old just got their license, could pay a terrible price. And what typically could happen is that a point where there is an established crash pattern, then the DOT will come in and put in a median, and we'll have no input. So if it's something we as a council and as citizens are interested in opening up the discussion with the DOT, I did have a meeting with them, and they are willing to do whatever redesign it takes to go back and get the median in, because there's going to be a lot of pavement out there. There's enough room for the 4 lanes plus a 17-foot median. So,
and the sidewalks?
And the sidewalks, they won't take any more right of way. So you think about the road being wide enough for that with just the center turn lane, speeds are going to be outrageous anyway. So, the safest way is to have a meeting with U-turns. So I may not be popular for that, but I got to stand on what in my heart is safe and in the best interest of people traveling. I don't want to wait for someone to get hurt or worse and then it be done. So
Matt, you want to?
Yeah, Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong here, but the beginning of this conversation, would it be appropriate to say that that it started because of the delay in 191's
Correct.
construction, so therefore there's
That's right.
time
There's
now
plenty of
to
time.
revisit it, whereas before the decision, the
Right.
timeline did not necessitate the ability to have this conversation.
I just the thoughts of somebody getting hit trying to turn left.
Mhm.
What we can do as a town is we can talk with the DOT and we can get U-turns where we want them, where some input on that so that it makes it less of an inconvenience. and have that conversation. If we wait, we just get what they give us. If we wait and the time comes when there's enough of a crash pattern, it's going to happen. So I'm not saying that DOT is trying to do anything wrong. It's just that the typical response to a crash pattern is to do something. And I'd rather avoid the crash pattern first. That's my thoughts.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
James?
I'm good.
How about you, Mr. Kenny?
No, I don't have anything. You're gonna do the count. You're gonna.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna start out by, it's Clerks Week, National Clerks Week, right? So we got a very good clerk, by
Yes,
the
we
way,
do.
very good clerk, yeah, so. I appreciate everything you do, this whole council does, so don't want you to go anywhere, stay here. Let
That's
me
right.
get gone before you even think about anything crazy. I appreciate you a bunch. Farm Day, it was amazing to start out at 11 o'clock with rain. It was crazy. When I got up there, I couldn't believe how many people was running around. But it's a good thing, real good thing. We've got that to build on and our Santa tour to build on, and that's gonna be our two hot topics for the next few years, I think, because we really don't have a town to really run a parade or anything down through, so. And it sounds like now we might have trees and stuff in the middle of our route if they had a meeting. But anyway, so, and I'll go back to that. I've lived on 280 my whole life. It was 2 lane when I started. And it was, Dad planted big pine trees so us kids wouldn't get killed playing football in the front yard because they was still running 60, 70 mile an hour up through there at big straightaway. So then when they built the road, they tore the trees down, and then we had the 5 lane. My issue with it on 280, and just like I've told MPO and everything else, if I come out of my driveway, the way it's proposed right now on the 280 drawings, I've got to go to Brickyard Road to do a U-turn to go down to the store. Then guess what I got to do when I come out of the store? I've got to go all the way down to Ray Hill Road to come back home. That's a tough take for me, you know. I've raced cars, so I'm not scared of wrecking, but I'm also going to pay attention to what I'm doing. And I know everybody don't do that, but if you take everybody on that 280 corridor and you run them up the road 1.5 miles and back down 4 miles and then, or whatever, just to go on their little routine, daily routine, it's going to be a burden to the citizens on gas money and stuff. I mean, it is. And I'm just saying it to be saying it. I don't have a problem with a 5 lane. I will maybe when I'm 80, but right now I don't. But I'm speaking for the majority. I think a majority can manipulate and get through that deal pretty good. But I see here where it might not be a big deal because they're going to, if I understand correctly, from right out here, they're going to be medians all the way into town anyway,
All the way into
correct?
town, yeah.
So
From
here
Schoolhouse
to-
Road.
From Schoolhouse Road on, it'll be median anyway. So here, chances are, if we could get us a turn into town, and then we know we're going to have a decent intersection at Schoolhouse
And Banner Farm.
and Banner Farm. So here, we're going to have 3 decent places. So I don't think it's a big deal for here. Now that 280, and these farmers and everybody with tractors, guess where we run with the tractors? We get in the turn lane. Because if you stay in them other 2 lanes, you're going to get it. You can't even run up through the grass. You got to get in that turn lane to go up through the tractor. Unless it's a big tractor and they just don't want to hit it. So that's my take on that. If nobody's got anything else, we'll move on. All right, manager updates.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just be brief. I want to second what Council said around Municipal Clerks Week. I think we have a fantastic clerk here, and I want to thank Patty for all her work keeping me straight on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for that. A couple of other things to let you know, you may have seen if you looked out near Forge Mountain, the tower, the monopole has been installed at Forge Mountain. There's still some work that needs to be done to make sure that it's ready and operational, et cetera. But there's a nice visual sign. I know that this community and many communities in the area have been waiting to see the visual sign of that tower, and so it's now there, and the progress is continuing. You may have also seen some progress out front on the accessible park expansion element out there. Again, we're still on track right now. There are a couple elements that are left, but even today they were still installing some of the new pieces and new playground equipment. So we're very excited to have that come online very soon. I want to echo also what Councilmember Good and others said about Mills River Day. I thought that it was my first Mills River Day to actually be able to see it. I think I mentioned last time it was my first. I think it was one of the first meetings I had was talking about Mills River Day when I came here in July of last year, and it was exciting to see how the culmination of the work and the partnerships that go into play to make that that day a success. And so I want to thank all of our partners. I want to thank our staff for all the hard work that they did. It really came together, and I think it was very much a success, both from our standards, but then also from the community at large, being able to come out there and enjoy the day. And then I just want to quickly ask around the 191 expansion, the 191 expansion and the 4-lane conversation. Is that something that council would like to have as an other business item to continue that conversation? If so, I would just recommend you bring that up during that time. And then if there are items that we may choose to talk about at that point, then we can have that. And that concludes my my remarks. Thank you.
Do we have anyone here for public comment? Okay, come on up.
So my name is Tammy Ross. I live on Schoolhouse Road. Haven't spoke here in a while. So I know y'all are going to go over the budget tonight, I believe, and I'm here very, very preemptively early. So I am hoping that for the new park next door, I know there's a whole lot of things. I'm on the park board, so I know there's a whole lot going into it. I know that we've asked for the infrastructure plans that have to be done first and all of that. So that set aside, which definitely needs to be done and we're asking for. So I'm here on my own, not representing the park board, but by myself as a user of the park, and just wanted to talk about the pickleball courts because I use the pickleball courts. A lot of people do, and it is impossible to play when it's windy at all. And if y'all have seen on the new plans, the master plans, the pickleball courts are going to be hopefully over on this old field part right here. And so I'm just requesting early and might remind y'all a few times from now in the next year or two that I would really hope that y'all think about installing the pickleball courts sooner rather than at the end of this whole ordeal, because I cannot express enough how many people would use those courts and how full they would be. And with having new ones, you could put better fencing up, then we could put something up to stop the wind so people could actually play out there more often, because if it's 9-mile-an-hour wind, you can barely play. So that's just my hope. And I'll come back and remind y'all and ask again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So help us remember another business to investigate windscreens for that fencing that we can see through. I don't want to put anything up that you can't see through because it would become
Liability.
behind it.
So if I may, Mayor, so we have had discussions about actually putting windscreens up on the current
Yeah.
current courts. The issue around the installation of those is actually around the stability of the poles and the pole sizes themselves actually bend if the
the
wind
wind.
would bend them. However, there is conversation, and I don't want to get too far ahead of it right now either, but through our FEMA reimbursement and mitigation repair work, with some of those poles there were a lot of poles that were damaged during the storm. And one of the areas that at least we're having conversation about is the mitigation effort to help potentially have larger diameter poles, which then would also then potentially allow for other opportunities such as windscreens or other pieces, just because again, because also when they bend, obviously they crack the courts, they create other issues. So it's not necessarily the windscreens that we're trying to mitigate, right? But it's the integrity of the court itself. So we are having conversations. We're aware of it. I did take a note and take that into consideration as well. And we're happy to talk about it in other business, but hopefully that helps
And it
provide
might be
context.
something we could actually just move over 3 feet or something for the time being and put up new poles and leave a walk corridor between.
Hmm.
And just, I think it would only need to be on probably this side and maybe the lower end. The prominent wind typically comes west through here. So yeah,
Yeah.
something to think about.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Well, we'll continue to explore it for
All right,
sure.
good deal. Anybody else
Mhm.
for public comment? Come on up.
Linda Britton,
Joe Britton.
and we live at 100 Old Turnpike Road. But we're not here to talk about that.
Wanted to give a quick, well, we wanted to give a quick update on the opening day for the farmer's market was Saturday also. We had as close as we could figure about 1,000 customers. How many vendors? I don't remember.
We had one empty vendor space,
Wow.
so we were full to the brim. And there are a number of days this summer where we are overbooked, but I know there'll be some people cancel. But right now we are beyond capacity on several weekends. But we were really surprised at the foot traffic that came in. Of course, we encouraged everybody to head up to Mills River Day when they were finished, and we had signage out promoting that as well. But we did want you to know that we're off to a good start. And the Young Entrepreneur Program this year, we have 20 children enrolled in that program. So it's a good thing. It started out with just one level. We have 3 levels of participation now for kids that are starting or ones that have been with us for a while and have moved on up. So big things are happening. So come see us at the market.
And also Mills River Day, we went up there after market and I'm still tired. So, but does anybody know how many people showed up at Mills River Day? Did anybody do any kind of count?
I haven't heard.
Okay.
So we have, we are exploring a better way to count actually moving forward. We have very rough estimates right now.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
It was good to go to the farm market. We enjoyed it.
All right. Consent agenda. Motion to approve our consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the
Yeah.
consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
All right, Brian. Any discussion on this consent agenda before we vote? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on to our regular agenda, our fiscal year 26 proposed budget.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm just waiting to make sure we're good to go. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Yep, okay. We're working. So, Mayor and Council, this is a big day. I'll say that it's an honor to be in front of you to present the FY26 proposed budget before you. For those that are in the room as well and watching at home, I think it's also important just to remember that in many ways, this is that the budget itself and the budget process is a culmination of really what makes the meat of local government, right? This is the ability for us to get together to talk through what next fiscal year looks like, and for yourselves as elected officials to make sure that it reflects your desires, your needs, and your wants for the community. As elected officials, you answer to the community, and so therefore this is one of the first steps in making sure that the budget reflects those community needs and your needs moving forward into FY26. And so I just want to say also, it's being my first budget with you all as your town manager. I want to thank you for the opportunity. It really is an honor to be here and to present this for you. We're going to talk about a few things today. First and foremost, this is the proposed budget. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have throughout the presentation. But this is really a high-level 30,000-foot view. Next week on May 15th, we are going to be having our budget workshop. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask for you all to make a decision on the time in which you would like to begin that session. And then also on June 12th, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask for you all to set that as the public hearing. Again, that's one of the requirements by North Carolina law that a public hearing is had. Now, at that public hearing, you're more than happy to have you may have the public hearing on June 12th and then choose at that time to approve the budget. Or again, we have that other meeting in June on June 26th where the budget can be passed. Again, this is your budget, your decision making on when and how it is passed. So for background, we're going to talk briefly about some key terms for yourselves and for those in the audience and at home. Talking about local government in North Carolina, because it is a little bit different. We're going to get a little nerdy in that part, but I think it's very important to set the stage for how we move forward with budgeting. And then we're going to talk briefly about our FY25 accomplishments. And then we're going to talk through when we looked at the hold on one second. I apologize here. I apologize. That is the Once we go through the key terms in the budget schedule, then we're also going to be talking about what those requests, your council visioning exercises happened earlier this year. I apologize, I got off a little bit on that. And then we're going to talk through the budget itself. So we're going to try to pull all this together into a package and be able to present the budget here in a minute. Well, fiscal year in North Carolina is a July 1st to June 30th timeline. That's different than some other states. We're going to be using the term municipality, but again, in the state of North Carolina, municipality can be a city, a town, or a village. It's also one of those fun little things about North Carolina is that you can be a town or a city or a village based off of what you so choose as a municipality. There's no population requirement like in some other states where you automatically move from a town to a city, et cetera. We actually get that choice. We're going to talk about our fund balance today. That fund balance is talking about, what assets we have planned moving forward in relative to the liabilities that we have to deal with, the plan for next year, and then also for the future years. Again, some people call it a rainy day fund, but really is to make sure that we stay in good financial health. We're going to talk about our general fund today. That's our operating account. And we're going to talk about some capital reserve funds, which are really our savings accounts. We'll also talk through capital projects that I'm proposing for you all to consider. And then last and certainly not least, when we looked at the budget for this year and our property taxes, 1 penny of our property tax equates to approximately $224,200 and change, but we rounded it down a little bit for you. So again, when we look through the budget, those are just a couple of things to consider. As a reminder for council, this is the budget development calendar that was proposed earlier this year. We had our council visioning exercise on March 6th, and I want to thank council again for your hard work on that day. It really did provide myself and our staff the direction necessary to build the proposed budget in front of you. On April 24th, we had the nonprofit request to council. And then on today is where we get together and we talk through the budget presentation and my both the proposed budget as well as the presentation that's before you. So as a municipality, we have a certain amount of services that we provide for the community here, and I just wanted to highlight a few of them. For building code enforcement, we outsource that via an agreement to Henderson County, and so as a partner for that work. Fire protection, we outsource that to Mills River Fire and Rescue via a contract. And our law enforcement is outsourced to Henderson County Sheriff's Office, and I want to thank them as great partners as well. We include Parks and Recreation, planning and zoning. We have street lighting and street maintenance as both core services as well for us here in the town. And then also watershed protection and improvements. I'm going to hope that this presentation doesn't go like last time's presentation when I was talking and we lost electricity. So I'm going to try to hurry this up a little bit. So when we're talking about the FY26 proposed budget, let's talk about the priorities. And so the priorities that you're going to see here is, and what we heard from the visioning exercises, making sure that we plan for the future, both short-term and long-term, while keeping taxes as low as possible for our taxpayers. And again, that's a goal that I hold very sacred to my role here as your town manager. And I believe that what you're going to see before you is that earnest attempt. Under operations, we're going to talk about COLA and merit standardization going into next fiscal year, again, about policies and procedures that could be a part of that. Through the strategic plan itself, we have talked, I'm recommending a community survey to be able to then hear from the community about how the town is doing. Continuing our HR consultant work with our partner around HR and payroll, and as well as upgrading our payroll system. Emergency communication system, again, this came out in light of the events of Hurricane Helene, the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, focusing on that. We've heard about additional funding for attorney's fees and attorney services through various boards and initiatives, and I want to make sure that that's presented. And then also looking at safety for our town staff and those that visit here by OSHA standards. Capital project funds are one of those areas where we can save money for future projects. I'm recommending that we move forward with the park maintenance facility and park expansion phases. This came out directly from our conversation with the visioning exercise. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, as well as through a town hall refresh. The capital reserve funds are really around those parks funds and those town hall funds. Those are continuations of current capital reserve funds that council has appropriated funds each year towards those. And then we have 2 grant project ordinances. Those are new items that are before you. Technically, they're currently going on, but you'll see them in the budget this year, really around our FEMA funding. That's technically a grant project ordinance. And then our cash flow loan. Again, council had approved the approximately $130,000 to the North Carolina cash flow loan program. That is technically a grant project ordinance. And then under the assigned fund balance, we'll talk through briefly additional funds for those next phases in the park projects. We've already hinted at that a little bit today, but we'll talk through that, as well as a continuation of the land preservation funds. So when looking at the FY26 overview, I'm presenting to you today a proposed budget that recommends keeping the tax rate flat from last year. So at a 17-cent tax rate, that is 0.07 or 7 cents towards the town and 10 cents going towards Mills River Fire and Rescue, or the Mills River Fire Department. And that is by the agreements that we have set up. And if council may remember, Chief Burnett came and presented his budget for Mills River Fire and Rescue as well, using the same 10 cents of the tax rate. Capital investment total as of right now is a little over $600,000, $617,475, and a total operating budget of $6.8 million. And that breaks down to a little over $6.5 million in actual operating, and then with $285,000 as to debt service payments. So a total budget that you'll see before you today is $7.418315 million. Again, that's $7,418,315. I think it's important for you all to see as well here under the total budget that it is a 5% increase over FY25 adopted. Now, what that means is that because although the tax rate is not increasing, because we want to make sure that we are continuing to be mindful of our tax base and being good stewards of the tax dollar, these increases are based off of projections of new properties or property sales, et cetera, as well as sales tax revenues. So now you can see here the total budget is 5% of increase over FY25, but it is currently presented at a 2.9% decrease from our amended FY25 budget. There's a lot on the screen here, so I'll just point this out for you here. We had talked about, again, those 2 capital project funds, or there's 2 capital funds that are around the recommended for FY26 around Parks and Recreation and then Town Hall. Those are still built in here based off of council's direction in the past, with 1 penny going towards the Parks and Recreation Reserve and the Town Hall getting 3/4 of 1 penny. And you can see that breakdown at the 224,000 under one, and then 168,000 in the other fund. And you can see in the past how this has trickled over time. In my opinion, this is a very much a look towards the future, and it's also a focus on staff development and improvement. And so the one thing I wanted to highlight here under personnel is that there are no current proposed increases in our FTE count for FY26. Again, as we continue on these projects that are around us, we know that those will continue to come forth as we determine what those future needs are. But there is a recommendation, and I'm actually going to skip down to the third one here, of actually working on moving a Tech 1 position up into a Tech 2 position, again, through professional development, through continuous improvement, that would merit a move to that next level in that position. So that's the one improvement, change, I would say, within the current FTE count. So going back up to the top, the COLA CPI policy recommendation that I'm proposing presents a COLA of 2.95%. And we have talked to council a little bit about this before, and your desires, by my understanding, to have some kind of COLA policy, my recommendation came out to 2.95%, which is comparing calendar year month to month, and then making that average adjustment for going forward. What is also baked into this proposed budget is a merit for performance pay. So on average, as you can see here, there's a 2% merit increase for full-time and part-time positions. And I want to talk briefly about this as well. It's for any position that's been that a person has been in that position for more than 6 months, and that is also and I'd take one step back on that. And then I would just say for the pro-rata for full-time and part-time positions filled afterwards, there's a percentage of. So again, if there's anything within that last 6 months, there's a little rationale for this, and I think it's helpful for council to recognize the merit for performance is, in my opinion, true. You truly have to perform in order to receive a merit. And so the one thing that I pride myself on, and I applaud my staff on focusing on, is that even in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, we've continued to meet the continuous improvement, the professional development trainings that were set out at the beginning of the FY25 budget. So as you may know, when I first got here within the town, one of the first meetings I had with department heads was to say, help me to map out what our professional trainings are for all of our staff so that we can know whether or not we're achieving to move forward and to grow. And so this highlights that work that the staff has done and continues to do in light of a year that I would say is less than normal. Now, what that also means is that merit for performance, I'm going to recommend a policy, again, as a part of the personnel policy update, that's going to be even more formalized than what I just mentioned. So going into next year, it will look different. But it'll be based off the same basic principles, as in there will be goals, you will have continuous improvement, professional development opportunities. We want to see those, document them, and see that change within the within your position, and therefore you will be able to meet your a merit of some sort going into next year. For the prorated in the last 6 months, it's hard a little bit because of the amount of time to find trainings and development, so it looks a little bit different. That's why it's prorated. We talked about the maintenance tech 2 position already. A couple of other things that you're going to see when we meet next week, when we go line item by line item. And again, I've skipped over that, but literally next week, we're going to go, literally number by number. You're going to see where we have built in overtime line items for applicable departments. Currently, Parks and Rec is the only one that has an overtime line item budget. However, moving forward, and in my opinion, the ability for us to track overtime, when it's being used, how it should be used, North Carolina law, I believe that this is a way for us to be able to track overtime and make sure that we're handling a liability that exists there. Again, investment in professional development, you're going to see that into next year as well. We've actually gone a little more into detail going into next year. And then this is the other item you're going to see built into when we talk about salary line items specifically next week, is that we have built in vacation payouts based off of projections through the end of the calendar year to lessen those liabilities that exist. So again, just as an aside, when somebody leaves the town, we are required to pay out their vacation line item. Currently, that comes out of our salary line item. which then can potentially hinder the town from being able to use the funds set aside to hire the next employee. Because if a person has a high vacation balance, right, and they get paid out, that lowers the potential balances left within that line item. So this is to help lessen that liability within that line item. And again, I'm happy to answer questions now or in the future about any of these. So when we talk through that, when we look at year-to-year comparisons, there's a lot of numbers on the screen. FY24 actual jumps out, I'm sure, to a lot of people on the screen. But the when you see FY25 adopted, we were just a little over $7 million. The FY26 recommended budget that is before you is at $7.4 million, which is an increase of $362,000 or 5%. And again, as a reminder, that 5% is on adopted. Amended, we are still projected at a decrease from where we amended. The operating accounts here, again, you can see most of that comes within operating. There is some that is built in, about 4% that is built into capital based off of the expectations and requirements that you as council has helped to show through the visioning exercise. And then a debt service decrease. And again, this naturally happens. We're not gaining new debt, we're paying off debt. So that's the new debt service number. So when we break it down a little bit more for you today, you can see that the largest part, and perhaps this is not surprising, the two largest parts of the pie chart are our fire and our police contracts. Again, that is just because by the nature of those contracts, fire gets the fire contract is 10 cents of our tax rate, again, which is why it's the majority of the piece there. The police is projected to be at $1.13 million this year. That's an increase of 10% from last year. And again, we will go into more detail as to how that breaks down next week. But the total here is looking at $7.4 million. When looking at our capital expenditure overtures, capital expenditures, for next year, there really are these 5 buckets here. And these 5 buckets, again, are looking at parks maintenance facility and uplift, the UDO, because we're not completely spending down our UDO funds from this year. There's going to be a rollover going into next year, so we have to budget for that. As well as for our park upgrades and general equipment, the park expansion project, which is again on the property that's behind us, and then the site and the building improvements. Breaking that down a little bit more, this is what it actually looks like, what we're projecting. For Parks and Recreation, the 41.5 is looking at basketball court resurfacing and a hydro seeder equaling $41,500. My understanding is basketball court resurfacing is desperately needed. And again, we'll talk more about what is needed and the timing, all of that next week. Planning and zoning, as I already mentioned, these are the projected rollover funds for this year. The park maintenance facility and upfit project, that is currently at $150,000. And I think it's helpful to talk through for yourselves and for those listening, what the $150,000 is for. So we believe that schematic design phase itself is going to be about $50,000. And again, that is the ability for us to understand what may work on that site. All right. We then, based off of current estimates and what we've heard from a big, high level position, another 100,000 set aside for actually talking about site preparation, what elements may be needed to prepare that site for potential build. And so that $150,000 is really a placeholder, but our best guess as of right now for getting that site ready for potential construction costs estimated in FY27. Now, I'll talk about the park expansion project, and then I'll talk through, you'll see a little bit later on in the fund balance, but a little method here as well in a minute. The park expansion project behind us, it's a water and sewer master plan. The expansion property, again, we've been told would be approximately $50,000, give or take. And then the stormwater environment restoration, conceptual plan layout, potentially working on that area in the back, because we've talked about, and as council may remember from the visioning exercise, the ability to get the park up and activated, there's a certain timeline. The back area for the getting a trail going in that restoration project is a potential area to think about. So we've allocated $100,000 towards that potential. Again, it's a potential first phase, a first step. Now, those are in the capital expenditure line. So essentially what this means is that there's going to be in our budget that says essentially capital project fund, park maintenance facility and upfit as an example. Later on, you're going to see in the fund balance conversation where this proposed budget recommends assigning a certain portion of our fund balance towards these same project areas. The difference is that by keeping them within the assigned fund balance, it doesn't lock those funds up for us. So in case, again, from a good government perspective, being able to say, hey, we don't know what the next, hopefully we do not go through another event similar to the last year. However, what it does say is that as a council, if you so choose to move forward with this, council is saying that you are showing the willingness to move forward with that future expansion. You know it's going, you're investing in it. And when we actually get the phase approach done and the layout done, the understanding of what that first step is, those funds that are assigned within the fund balance can be moved into the capital project fund and then be able to be distributed through that. So that's, again, I'm giving a little ahead of myself, but just want to let you know that that's the method that we are recommending as of right now. Last, certainly not least, site building improvements, $120,000. That's based off an estimate that we received for full town hall and library painting and carpeting. So again, a priority that came out from the visioning exercise. Looking at revenues. Again, we have various revenues that are before you here, but the two that really strike, that are the highest magnitude, I would say, are ad valorem or our property tax revenues, as well as our state shared revenues or our sales tax. So those are the dark blue and the lighter blue areas there. So again, we're projecting right now 3.7 million in property tax, and then the state shared or sales tax revenue at 1.5 million. I do want to take a second though and just have a conversation about about how we are looking at our projections. We took a very conservative approach to our sales tax projections this year. And the reason why for that is the latest that I've seen, the latest that we've seen is that the state of North Carolina thinks we're going to be around 2% sales tax growth. The one question that I think not just myself, but if you ask any town manager or manager within the region is right now we're looking pretty good with our sales tax continuing. However, we don't know whether it's a blip in the system during recovery and that there may be a more leveling approach, or if it's going to continue moving up. So the approach that I'm recommending is actually looking at our last actuals. So our last actuals came from the end of FY 2024. And so the number before you is the actuals that we received from the last full budget cycle, or last full auditing cycle, which is FY 2024's end. And that is that 1.5 million. Now, if I were, a betting person and, if I were bullish, I like to think that this isn't a blip in the system. But what this does, in my opinion, is protects the town from budgeting over its skis, essentially, and being able to make sure that we're making sound financial decisions without overreaching our revenues projections. So again, and for those that are playing at home, the 7.418315 at the bottom does equal the expenditures on the other side, which is required by law for a balanced budget. The FY 26 fund balance allocation, this is another conversation for you here. And I apologize, if I may, I am going to actually go back for one to two slides here. I do want to bring up one thing here that I forgot to mention. Actually, I apologize. I was correct. Only back one slide. The third item up there on the list is fund balance appropriated. Now, again, in order to be good stewards of the fiscal of the fiscal dollars to make sure that we are not overtaxing our community. And so for that reason, there are times in which we need to pull from our fund balance or our rainy day fund to make sure that that covers expenditures that may be coming forward. That $685,008 projection currently, most but as of right now, we have about $620,000 to $650,000. So as you can know, 617,000 and before you of capital projects out of that 685,000. So there's approximately $70,000 that's difference between those large scale capital projects as well as compared to the fund balance allocation. By the end of it, in fact, my finance director over here can attest to this as well. There are small capital projects that are currently within our operating budget as well, just because we have a low capital threshold that we believe it's going to be quite a 1-to-1 ratio between fund balance and capital, which is my recommendation for how we move forward, because having those one-off costs from fund balance is my approach to making sure we have a very sound budget. So I didn't want to overshadow that real quick. So thank you for letting me go back. Now, looking at the fund balance here before you, the land preservation, as we talked about before, that $500,000. One of the things that we had talked about during the visioning exercise was, do we want it as a capital reserve fund, or do we want it as assigned fund balance? When we went back and looked after that meeting, we recognized that it actually cannot be a capital reserve fund. It has to stay, in our opinion, it has to stay as an assigned fund balance. So that's why it's here before you. That $40,895 for Mills River Farm Market is our projection on what's left from the SNAP program. State statute is actually an LGC requirement to ensure that we can make sure we pay our bills at the end of the year. So that's why that's there. POW bill, again, we're conservative in our POW bill estimate. If you may have seen in the expenditure line item before, or in the revenue line item before, there's still a little bit of unknown within the General Assembly right now around POW bill. So again, we're conservative on that, but that's the total that we see there. You see the two capital reserve funds that we talked about, the two, and then the next two items are the property and the upfit, both at $500,000 each. The reason why, again, another item to bring up here is because we want to exhaust every grant opportunity that comes before us when we look at these two projects. And so what this does in our estimate, in our understanding, provides us with the greatest leverage when we're filling out those grants, because we have now assigned fund balance. We have capital projects that are named with funds in it ready to go. And these $500,000 in each allow us to be able to make decisions and bring those decisions to council to determine if a restoration project comes before us, or an expansion piece, or what have you. These funds will be able to quickly move to help in jumping, to make those things happen. So that's our method. That's our logic behind why those exist there. So again, a total of $1 million for those two projects currently. Building maintenance, general budget, building maintenance is a little over 40,000, and then our police protection, as it currently stands, is a little over 300,000. And again, as I mentioned, that appropriated fund balance of $685,000. So at the end of this, the ending uncommitted total is a little over 4.6 million, almost $4.7 million. Now, when we do our fund balance, as a reminder for council, our fund balance policy says that at a minimum we need to have 65 to 75% of our fund balance, of our funds allocated with. Our fund balance policy has to be 65 to 75% of our operating, right, of our general fund. So in total, if you that does not include. We can include our assigned fund balance within that number, right? So at the end of it, we're estimating at about 85%, correct? So even though right now we're showing 4.7, that's uncommitted. What's available fund balance, that's an not restricted fund balance, is going to be at about 85%, which still meets the minimum thresholds that council policy states. Yes, sir.
Can I ask some questions from the new guy on the block here?
Absolutely.
So the fund balance is money in the bank. Some of that money's promised. So we promised $500,000 for land preservation. That was promised some time ago, but it's still in the bank because we haven't spent it yet.
Yes, sir.
And so as we keep coming down, there's $40,000 in building maintenance that we've set aside to use that for. We may or may not use it this year.
Mhm.
And then it comes down that then there's finally $695,000 that we're going to use in this year's budget.
Mhm.
So we're sort of spending that balance down by paying for some things that if we didn't pay for them, we'd have to get the money somewhere else.
Mhm.
So we're kind of dipping into that rainy day fund in a way, but we still have plenty of money left over to meet the state guidelines, state requirements.
Now, I would say,
Right.
yes, sir. And I would say even more than the state guidelines, your guidelines. So your policy states 65 to 75%. Every town has a different threshold because every community is of a different size. So, but yes, you're absolutely correct. And so, and as I mentioned, the majority of the appropriated fund balance would be going towards capital direction and the priorities that council has presented during the visioning exercise. And again, that you all are able to tailor through this process on what you actually want those capital projects to be or capital initiatives to be going into next year.
And one last question, the PAL bill money is money that's been deposited over the years.
Mhm.
And it's allocated to spend on town maintained roads.
Mhm.
And because we've really just got the one road here,
Mhm.
the money that it doesn't take to keep this up, we're saving, but we can use that, for instance, on the infrastructure at some point in time.
Yes, for qualifying projects, absolutely, yes.
So
Mhm.
I think that's very positive. Thanks.
Absolutely. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a 30,000-foot view of the budget. We're going to get very deep into it next week. But I just want, but for today, in summary, the current budget before you has 617,475 set aside for capital investment priorities based off of the conversations that we have had so far through this year and through this budgetary process. I'm going to try to ignore the hail that is hitting the window behind me. And then looking at those phases, both in the due diligence phases on those two major projects, as well as to town hall upfit. It is a 5% increase from the adopted FY25 budget. And you can see here again, those breakdowns of where those expenses are shown within each item. There's no proposed tax increase in this budget. It is the same as the current year. And again, focusing on building in COLA and merit adjustments with policy implementation going into FY 2026. And so my goal is to actually have those before you at the end of this fiscal year, so that then going into next fiscal year, it is adopted and it is council policy moving forward. Again, if council so wishes to move in that direction. And so then, with that being said, we are now at the green dot. We are now preparing for May 15th, and I would ask again for council's consideration on setting a time for that meeting. My recommendation, based off of what I have heard back, is either 5 or 5:30 for that time, and then also at the end of this, as I mentioned, from June 12th. I would ask council to set a public hearing so that we can make sure we meet all the North Carolina legal requirements for that meeting as well. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Oh. Would it be a fair statement, just so the public knows, that the Mills River Fire Department and the sheriff's contract takes up probably 80% of our property tax money?
It takes up a very large share. Yes, and so Mills River Fire Rescue is 10 cents, and I believe and again, I don't want to do the rough math in my head, but 1.1 million divided by the 224,000 would give you a rough estimate of the,
About 4.5 or so. Yeah. Okay. What else y'all got? Any other questions? Ask away. No?
I
No?
got one quick one,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. On the debt service,
yes, sir.
there was some fancy word, I'm assuming we're talking about this property. There
Mhm.
was some fancy loan we had to go into where it was, I thought it was going up over time, not going down. I don't remember the name of it. I mean, some
Yeah.
term.
There's an amortization policy, and that's what we based that number off of going into next year, correct? Yeah, so based off of what we have on the pay plan for next year, that is what that number is based off
Yeah,
of.
as long as you use that amortization schedule, it'll be what it's gonna be.
So,
But it was a slight difference.
That's where the amount
Yeah,
of
it was set
interest.
to go down.
so is the
Yeah.
debt service including interest on the,
Yes. Yes, sir.
So as we pay it, it's your interest, the rate stays the same, but your payment stays the same, but your interest on your total balance is going down.
I thought we had to do it. We signed some different note that said
Doesn't the
it
payment,
was.
it's like there's two
I'll have to
payments.
Look back,
The principal's payment stays the same,
correct.
but the debt part of it comes down every year. Is that right?
She could help us with it if she's got a chance to look at it much at all. It was a little different than ordinary, but it was a state mandated
So,
policy.
when looking at
It was
our,
a little different.
Mhm.
yeah, so when current, and I'm going to look over at our finance director here as well. When currently looking at it, our principal is increasing next year. Or saying the same, I'm sorry, I apologize. Yeah, the principal is 185. So it actually is an increase from last year. However, the interest on that is decreasing slightly, about what, $9,000 or so is at the line item. So so the interest itself is going down, but the payment itself it
There's a
has
slight
a slight
change.
increased.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to your point, I believe it's slight increase on the payment, but the interest is going down. So the
Makes the
total.
interest go down faster,
Mhm.
or, yeah. Okay,
And I'm happy to dig into that deeper next week as well.
yeah,
For
I
you.
mean, you might want to look it up just in case I've got questions, because it was a little different than what we're used to seeing.
Understood.
You said it was about 100,000 in interest and 185 at principal.
And I apologize, I lost my page there. Yeah, that's correct. 185. Yes.
Brian, you got anything? Okay. All right, I'm good.
Thank you, Council. I just want to briefly say as well that this budget is not done alone, and I cannot thank the staff here for their tireless work over the last couple of months, helping to pull this budget together and making sure that what we presented to you was a balanced budget for your consideration. And so I want to thank them for all of that hard work and dedication.
All right, we thank them too.
Thank them too, yeah.
Moving on to B, oh, go ahead.
If
Sorry.
we may, we would,
Oh.
at the public hearing, we
Okay.
would recommend a public hearing.
So, somebody go ahead and make us a public hearing for. We can,
Recommend vote.
yeah. We gotta have a motion for well, probably for both. For both, yeah, because we're special, yeah. Do them separate though for,
The green sheet before you has a recommended language.
Okay.
For the hearing, but yes.
Make motion to set a public hearing for the budget on June 12, 2025.
I got a first, how about a second?
I'll second.
Jeff, second. Any discussion on that before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, and then somebody make us a motion for our meeting and put a time in it for the 15th, next Thursday.
What time y'all want to meet?
I like 5:30.
I'll make whatever, just be prepared if we come in here, it's gonna
I'm good with
be
being
late
here
getting
early.
out of here. Yeah, but it'll be what it is. Yeah, you working
Well, I
that
mean, I
way.
can do 5. I can do 5 if we want.
Are you, is that
Can y'all-
one of your days over there?
Yeah, I'll work here. I'll
Oh,
work from home.
Are you good with 5, James?
yeah, he's looking. You good? Can you do 5 easily enough?
Yeah,
Okay,
5's
I
fine.
can, I'll make it work. Okay. All right, might get us home by 9:30 or 10 that way.
My
I
orders.
make a motion that we set the next council meeting for 5 o'clock, and that'll be on May 15th.
All right, and, you need a specific name for that, because we're only gonna, you got
We
it,
got it.
okay. All right, second. Second. Brian, second. Any discussion on what we're doing that day? What we're doing is, hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, whenever y'all are ready, we'll move on to B, adoption of resolution 2025-11.
It's council's lucky day. You get to hear me present a little bit more.
Did we set the public hearing? Well, okay.
So, Mayor and Council, the proposed budget that you saw before you builds in projections based off of, among many other things, the benefits packages that go towards our staff. And so one of the things that we need to talk about today, and I will be seeking your approval of the recommendation today, is the ancillary health insurance move that before the July 1st transition. So brief history, February 24th, we received, as well as many other municipalities many other municipalities around the state of North Carolina, received notification that the North Carolina Municipal League of Municipalities Health Benefits Trust would close as of June 30th, 2025. So we currently do not have our medical through that, but we do have all of our ancillary benefits through that trust, which is vision, dental, short-term and long-term disability, as well as our group life and accidental death and dismemberment insurance. Literally the next day on February 24th, I reached out to the League of Municipalities to make sure that we had a game plan and next steps available to us to make sure that we had as smooth a transition as possible. March 7th, I was a part of an information session held on the league for alternatives that they recommended. And then we also, by the 11th, we actually had what we call our census data, our data for health insurance benefits for available for us to actually go out and start looking for alternatives. So since March 11th, we've been living in understanding a lot of insurance, a lot of different types of insurance and opportunities for our staff for next year. So my goals when presented with this was to look at keeping comparable services for town staff. Normally, if you're going to be doing a review for benefits, you start it in October, right? To make sure you have plenty of time to see what the benefits are. Because of the late timeline for this, my main goal was to make sure that the services were comparable for our staff so that they can keep their doctors, their dentists, whomever by July 1st. While also making sure that we kept our current providers if possible, right? And then finally, making sure those costs are as low as possible to the taxpayer, right? So balancing those three elements were really those three priorities for what you're going to be seeing before you. Not a part of the recommendation today, but just I think it's helpful to understand the full benefits package that's before you, is that the medical coverage that the town covers currently 100% of employee only and 75% of dependent coverage. So I bring this before you just because I think it's helpful to talk about medical before we talk about ancillary. What we have currently been quoted is that, to our surprise, I'll be completely honest with you, I was not expecting this, a 10% decrease in the cost of employee-only coverage from FY25 into FY26. You can see those costs there. When you see at the bottom, you can see that 10%, how it breaks down equally across the board based off of if a person chooses a specific type, right? Whether or not it's employee only, employee with a child, or employee with family, or employee with dependent, right? And so you can see how that breakdown went from FY25 to what we're estimating in FY26. And so for us, this is, as you can imagine, medical is a large portion of our benefits package. So seeing that has actually helped in many ways when looking at going and looking for ancillary health benefits. Because, and before we get into this, the one concern that I have had and many others in management is that the trust helps to drive down cost, right? Because you're basically pooling in all of these small municipalities and large municipalities into one trust, and that drives the overall cost down. So going into this, we had an expectation that our costs are going to increase for ancillary benefits. So seeing the medical decrease helps to, in many ways, understand helped us this year with looking at the total package costs. It's a little hard to read on the screen in front of you here, but the really on the Delta Dental is what we currently have. Town covers 100%, and my recommendation is Delta Dental again moving forward into next year. The rates that you're going to be seeing are for a 2-year rate lock. So we had options between a 1-year rate lock and a 2-year rate lock. There was $1 or approximately a little bit around that, but difference between a 1-year and a 2-year rate lock. But based off of the volatility that now that we are in within this service, my recommendation is to go for the 2-year rate lock to make sure we have continuity over the next 2 budget cycles. So the monthly rate, you can see current year to FY26 and then the difference. There is approximately a $7 difference on employee only month to month coverage. Now, the town has chosen not to do any type of dependent percentages within any of the ancillary benefits. So we're only talking about employee only coverage for these costs. But you can see where the current year to my recommendation is going into next year. The 45-24 is approximately 19%. You can see about $12 difference for those who may choose employee child. Employee spouse is again approximately $12. The large portion of this recommendation right now is those who opt into employee family. It's a 38% difference. Now, what I will tell you is, based off of the conversations that I've had, this is the high estimate for employee family. I still have questions out with our providers on driving that cost down. However, the budget that you just saw proposed to you includes this number. Okay. So being mindful of that, looking at what the actual cost is to our staff, in FY25, it would increase about 19% for employer only. Employees with a child care is approximately 7% of what increase on what they would have to cover, and then 47% or approximately $40 a month if they do employee cost with family. So again, those are large numbers. We're going to do a full comparison of this at the end, I promise. Because of those prices, though, with Delta Dental, our current vision coverage is through a company called VSP. Delta Dental and VSP, when they proposed to us through one of our brokers, through our broker, they actually came as a like a package deal, Delta Dental and VSP coverage together. And so what you see before you is now called Delta Dental as my recommendation. However, it still goes through VSP, so a person within the town can still keep their same eye doctor because it's through the same provider, technically. So here you can see employee only. You can actually see decreases across, again, employee only, 0, basically even on employee child. Employee spouse is minus 7%. And again, about $1.50 increase for employee family. One thing I wanted to mention here is, because the difference with that package deal, this Deluxe 180 is actually a better product for town staff. Because it's an increase of $30 a month for frames and or lenses or contact lenses relative to the current one, which is $150. So for most, the same or a decrease in cost, but with an extra a little benefit due to that package deal. So as you can see here at the bottom, expected employer costs drives down about 18%. Again, these percentages are large, but the numbers are small, right? So you can see that the minor dollar increases and decreases within each plan. So next before you is short-term disability coverage. And so I'm going to flip to my notes here real quick as well, just to make sure I don't miss anything on here. We currently have Unum as our short-term, long-term, and life and AD&D coverage. This, what you see before you will be the same. Again, as you can see between the current and the recommended, pretty much across the board is the same coverage. So again, a staff member who's enjoyed this coverage currently will continue to have this coverage moving forward. And then for long-term disability, again, you can see the left to the right. What we really try to do is make sure we're mimicking what those short-term and long-term options are for you. So for the most part, across the board, the same. There's a little bit of difference around the occupation period between 12 months or 2 years, et cetera. So, but they're, for the most part, again, the coverage types, the monthly maximums, the full benefit that we currently have would continue. I know talking about insurance can be riveting. And so, so when you look at the breakdown of the cost, this is the other area that we had been told to expect a large increase specifically around short-term disability. In my conversations, every employee within the town of Mills River currently pays $14 for short-term disability, regardless of salary, regardless of anything else. What I was told is, but at least by some, is that they've never seen that before. And so this is the model that's before you is a more standard model for both short-term and long-term disability. You can see with the salary, there's a formula up there, but you'll see the breakdown at the bottom here. And then the same for long-term disability, there's a minor 1.5 cent per $100 increase on the long-term disability. So what does that look like for actual dollars monthly? You're looking at approximately $68 increase in short-term disability per month. And you're looking at approximately $13 more for a long-term disability per month. So again, that short-term disability, unfortunately, it was a known concern, but what you see before you is, in my opinion, and I have the numbers before me, I can pull them out. The lowest cost options that we had that provided at least comparable services and options that staff currently have. Last, certainly not least, is when you're looking at group life and accidental death and dismemberment. Not a fun topic to talk about, but it's a very important topic. Again, for the most part, relatively comparable. The one area that I would bring to your attention is around the maximum benefit piece between the $300,000 and the $200,000 maximum benefit. That's a year. Right now, currently, there are obviously no staff that have those, that were even coming close to obviously the 300,000. There's no one that's coming close to the 200,000. So we still feel very comfortable that this product here will continue to support town staff over the years to come. What that looks like, there's a little bit of a shift from what you had within your packet, and that's again because we gained a little bit more information from the even since the last with running the numbers just a little bit more. The current near group life is at 32 cents per 1,000. The one that we were quoted for, and I'm recommending, is at 0.262. So again, a slight decrease, about 14%. What does that look like again as a monthly rate? It goes from $267 approximately down to $230. So that's a whole lot of numbers. There's a whole lot of conversation, but really, what does it look like when you compare all monthly costs together for what I'm proposing for an FY27 bundle of benefits? Again, I'm putting medical in here as well, because again, when we look at this, we put it all under one line item. Medical has that 10% decrease. Dental right now, again, looking at monthly costs, are at a 25% increase. Vision is down 10%. Short-term disability has a large increase at 53% that we had talked about before, about approximately $70 or $80. And then a slight increase in long-term disability, a decrease in our group life and AD&D. But when you work it out and you put medical, and when you provide medical in there before as well, you can see that our FY25 total, now that's before we break it out for employer cost and employee cost. The total in FY25 that we're paying monthly is $17,228. Based off our estimate under the current estimates is at $15,832.65, which is a net decrease of 8%. So we saw a net, in other words, there's an increase that you can see within the ancillary, but the medical decrease has made it to where there's a net decrease of 8%. What does that mean for the town expense? Now, I want to be very clear. Staff may choose to move from one plan to another during open enrollment periods, et cetera. This is based off of current selection of what our current staff have. The FY25 town expense is a little bit over $15,700. The estimate for FY26, what town would be paying is $14,400, or approximately 9% decrease on a monthly expense. When it comes to employee though, and again, this is one of the things as the manager, one of my goals is to make sure that we also lessen the burden as much as possible on our staff. And so when looking at that, this was one of the other drivers for the conversation. When you see that breakdown there, the FY25, if you picked employee child, and again, generally speaking, right, if you have an employee child, a person who's opted into employee child, but doesn't have the vision coverage, again, right now, this is what that estimate would look like. It's a 6% decrease on their monthly costs going into next year. If they have chosen employee family, and that's an employee family across all benefits, it's approximately a 1% decrease, about $17, $16. And so again, this is based off of current selection and what we currently see moving forward to FY26. Overall, I'll say that it was a concern going into this, going into such a short time period to find coverages. But before you, I think, are very comparable coverages. And again, overall, there's a slight decrease overall, which again is a welcome sign when I finished crunching the numbers and then making sure I looked at my finance director and I said, please tell me that I'm correct, that these numbers are what they are. And so it was a pleasant surprise. So before you I'm requesting council to consider approving the attached resolution, which would authorize me to move and sign the contracts for the Delta Dental, the Delta Vision, and then the 3 Unum items as presented before you. By doing so, this would then now move us all under one broker. So as well. So right now we currently use eBen benefits for our medical. These are all, I went through multiple entities, but at the end of the day, best cost with comparable services came from eBen as well. So this would actually also move us under one for our full service. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Questions?
I have probably a silly question. So the town pays this much per month. The employee pays this much per pay period.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So when you see that per month, it's actually a little bit less than that per pay period.
Yeah, so it's
'Cause
actually
26 pay period.
exactly, yes, sir. So the way to do it is get the monthly total, multiply by 12, and divide by 26, and that's the payment per.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What else you got? Jack? You good? Good? All right.
Make a motion to adopt the resolution 2025-11 as presented.
And I'll second that.
Brian, Jeff, discussion on it? Any? No? All right. All in favor of passing this resolution? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Thanks for taking time on that. Had
Thank
to
you,
be
Counselor.
done, and We got it done. All right, moving along. I'm going to C, adoption of resolution 2025-10.
So before you tonight, we have the potential adoption of the South Mountains Hazard Mitigation Plan. Coincidentally, fell in the year we had a pretty major disaster here. A little background on the plan since we've not talked about this before. So it's a cooperative plan with the 4 counties in our region. So Henderson, Transylvania, Polk, and Rutherford. And all the municipalities in those counties. Again, counties traditionally have the role of emergency management, and so the county staff were kind of leading this charge along with the consumer. Obviously, North Carolina Department of Public Safety is involved in the FEMA as well, being responsible for disaster response. So the goal of the plan is to assess, reduce, and prepare for the impact of natural and man-made hazards. And the plan is required to be updated every 5 years. So it just so happened that the plan has to be updated by this July for all of these local governments to stay eligible for hazard mitigation grants, stuff like that. You have to have a hazard mitigation plan in place in order to qualify for that type of grant funding. The plan is quite long, but it basically involved identification of vulnerabilities, prioritization of mitigation strategies so we can better prepare for, respond to, and recover from a hazardous event. So although I've not talked about it, planning staff off and on has been working with these partners over the last year to update the town portion of the document and review other aspects of the plan. This is advisory, so this doesn't mandate the town do anything and does not commit us to achieving any of the goals or tasks that are identified. It just states we're willing to consider. One example I'll highlight in a second is basically for every hazard mitigation plan the town's been part of going back, one of the items was to consider participation in the NFIP, which actually we've checked that box already because we've met with the state representatives and considered it. So again, that's one of our goals that's rolled forward every year. Like I said, adoption of the plan, because we're a small partner in it, it still makes us eligible for federal grant and state funding for hazard mitigation. And I included just 2 examples here that could include, stream bank restoration to prevent flooding, to prevent damage to town property, potential loss of life from patrons on town property. Could even be upgrading storm drainage infrastructure. I think when we first met with the floodplain folks at the Hendersonville meeting, some of the traditional grants we heard were elevating structures, slope stabilization, stuff like that. But it's quite broad what you can apply for. Going through the attachments real quick. Attachment A is really just a checklist of every jurisdiction participating in the plan. And it's an assessment. So it's, says, do you have a zoning ordinance in place? Do you have an emergency response plan? And so on and so forth down the list. What I want to draw your attention to is the Town of Mills River Action Plan. So I'd say about half of these are existing actions for the town to consider in the next 5 years. And a couple of them are new as well. And I'll highlight those just for council to look at. So the first one was participation in the NFIP. So we've actually already done that for this year. And basically staff commits to bringing that up every 3 to 5 years, just as a discussion item. Develop a flood damage prevention ordinance is another one. We're obviously already looking towards moving toward a floodplain management ordinance. So some of these goals we're already moving toward for this year. Another one I added was actually considering seeking hazard mitigation grant funding because we've gone through a disaster. There's more monies available out there for that. And so that was a new action I added. We've had some discussions with the UDO about steep slope ordinances. And again, doesn't mean we have to adopt it, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity to include it because we're going to be considering those ordinances already. And again, that would mitigate a landslide hazard. So again, I won't go through the rest of the list, but those are some examples of what is in the town's mitigation action plan. And then staff's recommendation is for town council to adopt the hazard mitigation plan and the resolution as presented. Happy to take questions.
Questions? Is there a timeline on getting all this stuff implemented to be eligible, or just once we pass this, we are eligible?
The plan expires, I think, in July of this year. So the deadline we've been given is basically have all these local governments, everyone involved, all the municipalities adopt it by the end of June. That
Okay.
way, come late July, the consultants can submit it to FEMA, it can be accepted, and then everyone in those 4 counties will still be eligible for funding.
Okay. I mean, after going through some of the stuff I went through in Hendersonville, I mean, without that mitigation, a lot of these people would be left out with nothing. You know, they're gonna raise these elevations of these people's houses and everything and put them right back where they was with mitigation. Unbelievable, but they're gonna do some of it. Any other questions while we're here?
Because you said it, but I'm just clarifying, because we listened but said no to the national flood insurance, that we're safe moving forward
Mhm.
on this.
And that's been one of our actions, I think, every plan we've been involved with. And again, we've not been a participant in the program, so we've not been penalized. It's really just stating the town's adopting this plan and will consider doing these items.
Thank you.
Anybody? No?
I make a motion to adopt resolution 2025-10 as presented.
I'll second.
Jeff, second. Any discussion on this? Hearing none? Well, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none? All right, thank you. Yeah. All right, other business. Anybody got any other business?
I would like to, the discussion about the 191. I mean, I'm open to having that discussion.
Yes,
sometime in the future.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, when are they expecting something back from us at the MPO level?
I can't answer that right
Okay.
now. I can answer it next. Do you know, Derek?
I'm sure there's not really a definite timeline on it yet.
I got a text from the TCC recommended the resolution to the board. So the board will be talking about it next Thursday, the
Thursday.
MPO board. So I can report on that Thursday night.
Yeah, and just for clarification, so the TCC recommended this to move forward to the board. If the board approves it, one element that you all may, as council may consider is once that is, if it is passed, then bringing that forward for consideration at a future council meeting for the town of whether or not you all a resolution to agree or, to be approving that type of action or not. So it
Typic-
depends on how you all would like to move forward.
Typically with the MPO, they would probably like to see that before they approve. Once they approve, it's almost a done deal.
I think, me personally, I think what we should do is we should
Let them
Ask-
know, yay or
we
nay.
tell them that we're open to the discussion and that we would like to have representatives of the MPO and or the DOT come present it. What would it look like? What are we agreeing to support or not support?
So I've got a question for you as an
Sure.
engineer.
Mhm.
So would it be cheaper for them to construct the median versus paving it?
That's a great question.
I mean, that's
Um,
probably a DOT question.
There's going to be some money spent in the redesign,
Mhm.
and the DOT has the money to spend for the redesign.
I mean, cause I would love on this be a trade-off if we do this, to just simply raise that slight elevation that we've got out there at the double bridges. So we could get out of here if we have another flood. We have no way out of here. There was several hours, we couldn't have got anybody to the hospital because the helicopters wasn't flying, and we was on an island. And I preached this at the TAC meetings, I preached this, one reason I'm not on the MPO, they just blowed it off. They didn't want to hear it, didn't want to discuss it. But I said, you know, we're talking about build back and build back better. We're fixing to build this thing. What's 2 more foot of dirt out through there when we know that was a 100-year flood and there was, you know, 2 or 3 foot of water that people wasn't afraid to go through. So now is the time to do it. You're talking about mitigation. Now's a perfect time to get us one travel path out of here. And that would actually service the Brevard folk too, because they could come down to 280 corridor and go this way. They're not going down 64. I mean, you know, the river runs almost right along the 64 corridor. So that would be a great resource for several people to be able to access a hospital. You know, because if they get out here, they got a chance to go over to Advent or they can go on to Part E. They got 2 options. You know,
I'll bring that up.
I mean, I would be willing to do a trade-off. You know, I ain't saying I wouldn't go for it at all, but I'm just saying now is the time to fix these problems because you go fix that 10 years from now, it's going to cost what it's going to cost to build a road now. You know, just move the dirt now.
And if it becomes a safety issue, if it goes in as a 5-lane, it becomes a safety issue, money's going to be found to fix it.
No, I know. But see,
As opposed to if we
yeah,
have the opportunity to be upfront with it and get it to something closer to the town's liking, like you say, a trade-off.
yeah.
Where they have turnarounds at, are they gonna have turnarounds or is it gonna be a roundabout?
It'll be turnarounds.
It'll
Yeah,
be
not around.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any plans for a roundabout. I do know that the speed limit from here to Hendersonville is going to be lowered to 45 on the straightaways at the bridges. That'll be lowered to 45 as part of this. So not that that's going to help, and not that that's really an answer to your question. It's just something I do know that they talked about last week. So what I can do is, or Mr. McKeon, if you'd like to, we could reach out, let the MPO know that we would like to have some discussions in a public forum here to get an idea of what it's going to look like,
Yeah.
what ability we have to influence what it looks like.
Yeah, especially since, you know, several residents have been displaced that could have still been in their homes for several years now that it's been moved out. Several business between here and Hendersonville has been discontinued because of it. I mean, I mean, I understand what caused this, but you know, if we're going to change it again, let's look at it.
Yeah. And it should not add any time to it. There's
To the
plenty of
project.
time, right?
Yeah.
It's not happening until 2029.
So what
So-
you got? Is your idea to bring it up? What you got? I know you're thinking.
I think that it's a good idea. And you know, and I've heard this a lot, you know, during the election is that, and it's true, Mills River's losing a lot of its character. And if we can create opportunities for, you know, if you're coming down 191 and you hit, instead of how I don't want a grass median, you know, we have some plants or flowers or something like there, then, you know, it dresses things up and provides character. And I think that's good.
And I did ask about that. And there's the possibility of some funding to do landscaping in the median.
So I'm going to bring this up because I'm not going to be here when this happens, but I'm going to be here right now and tell you, you know, we got trails proposed coming intersecting into this road we're talking about. So you're worried about getting cars across them. How are we going to get these foot traffic and bicycles across them?
And I seen that, you know, we talked about this in our,
I'm just going to bring it up.
during, I seen somebody trying to cross the road with a dog, in the new, townhomes going to Ingalls to get their groceries. You know, and we knew it was going to happen. So it's like, you know, that's something that has to be addressed. Is there's no crosswalk there. Yeah.
You talking about scary? Go up to the airport and those people go up, walk up to the motel and stay, then walk back. And they've got that little unprotected triangle that's probably 6 by 6 to stand in. And they're just right there in no man's land. It's kind of sketchy, but they do it daily. But
pedestrian feature is going to be part of it. And
Okay.
there may be pedestrian signals where you push the button and you get a red light for a pedestrian to
But
cross.
that would be years from now. right.
That'll be when it goes in.
Well, ain't no way, because they don't know where they're at. They're not there. The trails won't be there when they build this road.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm talking about these major
That are,
intersection trails that Mills River, help me out. What's the name of it? Mills River? No,
Not that one?
the other ones, not the major Mills River Valley Trail, but the
Yakusta.
bicycle pedestrian plan. If they're ever built, there's one to intersect right there. And it's just gonna come into 2 lanes and no way to get across easy. They'll
Well,
figure it out when they get there, I guess.
when we're having that conversation here, would it be feasible to have a representative from the fire department and the sheriff's department here to put input in also? Having to get the calls quick.
Yeah, I mean, that is,
It's a concern.
that is a concern. I
Well,
mean, it
turning
definitely.
tractors, tractors travel this road just as much as they travel 280.
Mhm.
And getting them turned around too, and if you've got a loaded a tanker carrying water, they're not just gonna be able to whip it around in the road.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the U-turns are going to be designed
for tractor trailer.
for tractor trailers.
Right.
Yeah. That's
I just
something
think
we
it'd be
need to
good to
talk
have them
about.
here too, to get, if we're gonna discuss it, let's get all the input we can.
Yeah. I'm with you.
That's good.
One of this is projecting out a little bit into the future, but one of the elements that I think that I plan to bring forward to council next year is the ability for us to start trying to think through how all of these elements start to intersect with each other so that so that you all as council can be best able to influence where you all feel is necessary for those, because we do, to your point, we do understand that there's going to be a widening project. We do understand at some point there will be pedestrian facilities. We understand that we're actually, we're planning a park expansion right here. So what does it mean actually for our entry and our exit as a community as well, and for our residents who come here? So when you're balancing all of that, I believe going into next year, we're rife to have a conversation about how all of those intersect with each other, so that we can ensure that decisions are made as holistically as possible without them being siloed based off of who's in the room at the time. And that's something that we can help to work towards if council is amenable to that.
Sounds good.
Anything else on that? Any other business?
I would have a couple of questions. I would like to see, because there are sidewalks now on this side, but would that make it to where you had to have sidewalks on both sides? And then, yeah, I know me personally, for fire hydrants, I supposed to have one on the other side of the road, because that's where the water line is.
Mhm.
And if there's a divided highway, then I would have some questions.
Sure.
And I would like some direction from council on this. From what I am hearing, and I do not dare speak for you all, but is that next Thursday is the MPO meeting.
Mhm.
And so is it council's wish then, once that happens, or I could reach out now to them and say that that council is interested in, if you all are, to have that conversation and willing to entertain that after the meeting next Thursday. Then try to bring themselves, DOT, representatives, fire department, sheriff's department, to come in to have a conversation at a future meeting, to have a better understanding of what it would look like, concerns, issues, timing, et cetera. Is that correct?
We understand it.
I think so.
Jeff, do you know, is it on the MPO's agenda to take action on that Thursday?
Probably a resolution, but
Okay.
they would want the town to be in support of it also, I believe. I think and my understanding, what I talked to Tristan at the MPO about, is that we would discuss it and see how council would be leaning. If it's absolutely no way, then I'll report that back. If it's a, yeah, let's talk about it and see, then I'll report that back. Or
The problem is, am I reading it right though? If it's a resolution and they pass it Thursday, are we still gonna go in there and talk about it and possibly have them pull that resolution?
I think the resolution is just to open it back up with DOT. I don't think it's a
Okay,
support
okay.
or defend. It's
Okay.
just to get it
It's
opened up.
making
in
more
the-
sense
Yeah,
now. Okay,
because we don't know enough
true.
to change the towns. And it was the town that said, we want 5 lane.
Yeah.
We don't want a 4 lane divider. We
Yeah.
want a 5 lane. So there has to be a resolution from the MPO to open up the discussion.
Mhm.
And we had a meeting with DOT where the DOT said, yeah, we're willing to open the discussion. We're willing to do the design work. So even going back to the previous plans and looking at that, we can get an idea of what would go there.
Sure.
And then I think we have the opportunity to say, well, you've got your U-turn planned here. Let's move it here so it works better for tractor trailers making the turn or tractors making the turn, or, this will help the town entrance better. I think we've got that opportunity to talk to them
Okay.
and
And
get some assurances.
And that is my understanding as well, is that as of right now, there is no ability to have the conversation. The resolution would open up the conversation again. And then, so it's the beginning, not the end. And so it would allow for that seat at the table, to happen.
Because even if the MPO were to decide to do this and the town is against it, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the MPO has, the power to get the conversation going, but I think we still have the veto possibility on it.
Okay. All right.
And I told them, let's talk safety statistics, not just this is safer because we all think it's safer, but let's talk about what's out there.
Mhm.
And, it's go to
I'm just-
Bojangles, get you a biscuit, turn left,
I'm just thinking.
do it at 12, do it at
Yeah, I'm just
4:30
thinking
PM.
here,
Mhm.
it's still gonna be almost 5 lane for a quarter mile, cause they're gonna have to
Because
make
of the
a
turn
second
lane.
lane to get in here if we make a left in here. So just keep that in mind too. There's gonna be a lot of people trying to get into this park on certain events. And if you got that one hanging out and people ain't used to them sitting there, they're gonna get it. So you're creating another safety thing, in my opinion, but you gotta, y'all the engineers, y'all figure it out. But anyway, yeah, don't leave it to me. I'll make it twice as wide and pave it off. Slide them in there.
Slide them in.
All right. Anybody else? Not, we'll keep rolling. All right. All right, well, I need a motion to adjourn our regular meeting.
Make a
Yeah.
motion to adjourn our regular meeting.
Thank you, Brian. Second,
I'll say.
Sandra. Any discussion on why we're adjourning this one? Hearing none. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, now we'll need a motion to go into our business.
I make
Portion.
a motion that we go into the business portion of the meeting.
All right.
And I'll second.
Sandra, then Jeff. Any discussion on doing this? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. All right.
And council, before you on the first item is is a continuation of a discussion on the draft floodplain ordinance. And so as a reminder, a while back at a business meeting, council directed staff to begin looking at a potential floodplain. Oh, thank you, Mike. Sorry about that. About what a potential floodplain ordinance would look like for the town of Mills River. And you provided us with great guidance and background on those initial 30,000 foot looks into what a floodplain ordinance looks like. And tonight we wanted to continue gathering that information. And Mike, before you, has done a great job providing some details to get feedback.
Thank you. So just to recap where we've been, what got us to where we are now. So we got direction from council to look at a floodplain what I'm gonna call floodplain management ordinance. And then we got direction to wait to adopt that until we have further clarification about the down zoning. We had specific direction about limits for fill, and then the last time we met and talked about this, we went through specific provisions of what the different regulatory options could look like and got feedback from council about what we should regulate, what should be exempt, and so on and so forth. So in the background, over the last month and a half, staff's looked at other example ordinances in our region from our neighbors, reached out to our state floodplain experts, and basically came back with a couple of specific regulations that we now need to narrow in on how we specifically want to permit things, limit fill, etc. Again, here's the floodplain or the special flood hazard area. Council made a determination at the last meeting that we're just going to focus on regulations in the floodway and the 100-year floodplain, which is good because actually we found out the general statutes do not give us authority to regulate the 500-year floodplain, which makes sense because that's why the 100-year floodplain is called the regulatory floodplain. Anyway, so going to land uses and structures, how are we going to regulate these in this draft ordinance? And again, this is basically what staff's put together, and we can stop every slide like we did last time, have a quick discussion and check in and make sure this is the right direction. So what would be allowed by right for structures and general land uses in a special flood hazard area? So we heard agriculture and bona fide farm uses would be allowed by right, and residential accessory structures, but with no dwellings, would be allowed. Now, those would require a zoning permit, whereas agriculture is exempt from the town zoning requirements. So there would be no permit needed for agricultural land uses or structures in floodplains. Now, what would be allowed with a floodplain permit? There was discussion at the last time that if there's a business specifically related to the waterway in the special flood hazard area, it's actually called in other ordinances a functionally dependent business because their business function depends on that water, tubing, fishing, something like that. So that's one thing for discussion is council okay with allowing that type of business in a special flood hazard area with a floodplain permit? Now, one thing I saw in all the other ordinances is that commonly when it is allowed, the municipality requires that no rise certification, so that engineering study. So that's something I wanted to discuss. Another thing commonly allowed with floodplain permits are governmental or utility land uses or structures. Another thing that was common was when these are allowed in those special flood hazard areas is requiring that engineered no rise certification. So again, hiring an engineer coming out, making sure whatever fill or whatever building you're placing is not causing a rise in floodwaters to impact someone else downstream. And then the last part on that, and then I'll pause in a second, is do we want to allow structures in the floodway itself? Because we're talking generally about the special flood hazard area, which was 100-year floodplain and floodway. But if I have a tubing business, do you think we should only allow those structures in the floodplain, or do you think we should allow them, in the floodway, the area regularly being overflowed with water close to the water body? And then lastly, and I'll get back to those, the things I heard were going to be blanket prohibitions are general non-residential structures and uses, commercial, industrial, any type of single family dwelling, any type of multifamily dwelling. So happy for general feedback on that, or if you'd like, I can dive into the specific questions about the items under allowed with a flood.
Well, my issue with allowing structures in that floodway is if they work their way free in a flood situation, where it ends up and what other damage it causes on its way. And, it could get down there and get lodged up and create a change in the water flow and actually take out something that wasn't actually in the 100-year floodplain or the 1%. So I have issues with that. As far as the tubing businesses and all going in there, I don't really have a problem with that kind of stuff because it could potentially be easily moved out of there. Or if it got free, it's not that big a deal. Where are y'all at with this?
Well, would they need permanent structures?
Well,
For
I
a
mean,
tubing
they gotta
business?
put the stuff somewhere. Think about going through Bent Creek. They've got them container boxes.
Right.
Those got washed around a good bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the tubing company that does business over there in Etowah, they keep their stuff at a different place and drive them down there and put them in the river.
You know,
That way they don't have permanent structures down there.
that's
Because
what
with structures come other things too, like
well,
propane tanks and, or, you know, trash cans and all kinds
Off-season
of stuff. Yeah.
and you know, if you got a permanent structure, you really need sewer and water. And we don't have a lot of sewer and water, especially in some cases along certain sides of the river. So you sure enough don't want septic tanks and stuff get blocked in that, you know, even if they can figure out a way to get them in with an engineer. Anything else?
I agree. I mean, I don't think we should allow any structures in the floodway.
That
That's-
floodway's pretty treacherous territory. And that was pretty regular around here in that part. Help us out, Michael. What
So
else?
I've heard that from a
Quick.
few, so I'm writing down no structures in the floodway for these specific types. What about the no-rise certification? Do we want to require that type of business? What if, Buncombe Sewer needs to replace a pump station? And then I included governmental, because what if the town wants to do something back here? Do we want to require a no-rise certification for structures, fill, or land uses of these types?
You know, I'm just, I mean, Jeff, feel free to help me out, but I mean, I've talked to DOT and everybody, you know, about this and they're begging for us not to put a no fill if we do one because, you know, they said inevitably they're gonna have to do something that's gonna create a slot fill at best.
And I've got a whole slide about fill.
Mm.
So this would be specifically for permitting the use itself
Okay,
or a
okay,
structure.
I got you.
And that's not necessarily a roadway.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. I got you.
Okay.
But yeah, there you go again, though, pump stations, whatever. You know, we need to keep all that in consideration. You know, to me, if you concrete in a container box where you put your tubes in, I mean, it don't take a genius to realize that water ain't gonna run through it, it's gonna run around it, and that's gotta be a rise. Right?
Mhm.
Okay. So, you know, I'm just saying, anything could create a rise, it's almost looks to me like. That you had on top, that you brought in.
So do we want to require the certification then or no?
That's the only
And
way.
again, this would just be for these types of permits. So again, a water dependent business, a governmental use or a utility use, something public.
Where's that?
I don't think it's a bad thing to require a certification.
And
for
this isn't
full-
the end all be all.
Yeah.
This is just the feedback I'm gonna take to put into a draft. So of course,
Okay.
this can always be modified later. Elsa's point.
I agree with James.
And it doesn't account for the DOT putting road repair
No,
in.
it's just this specific part.
Utilities, it's just that. So yeah, I'd be good with that.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
Yep.
So in the agriculture bona fide farm use, we're saying they don't have to get a permit to put any structure. Is that what?
Correct.
But they can do it in the flood way?
Correct.
I'm not for that. Not the floodway.
This lodge. The problem with that is, I think, is they don't even have to go through the county to get a building permit for
Right.
that, unless they're getting electrical in it or some type of plumbing or something. So, Michael, would that be an easy thing to track for us, or would we just happen upon it one day and say, oh goodness, so you put a building there? You see what I'm?
Unless there's a permit, it's not gonna be tracked.
Mhm.
I mean, just like there's agricultural improvements that happen around that town today, and I only find about it when I drive past it.
Sure.
Because again, there's no permit requirement, which is fine.
I mean, that's,
We don't even have to do it on the weekend. Do it in broad daylight.
Yeah.
What about like, where they sort of popular, put those spray sheds up on a hill
Mhm.
in the floodway? Say, make that to where it just,
I just think if we're doing this, to protect floodways is what we're,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, that's the whole purpose of this. And if we're just gonna, to me, the agriculture thing is too loose. It's too broad of a definition. And yes, there is people who will use it correctly, but then there's a whole group of players who will use it unfaithfully. And we're going to be back in the situation where we're having to answer for why we allowed this.
I think just do it all, because you're
Okay.
sort of crazy to put a
Well, I agree, but
shed in anyway.
So add agriculture and bona fide farm uses to keep all those structures out of the floodway.
floodway.
Is that even a possibility to write in there?
I mean, we could write it in. I don't know how I could demand compliance, but.
Yeah.
Is there a consensus on that?
I think you have a whole slide on bad players, don't you?
Well,
That was just a comment, that I carried forward last time.
I mean, unless you, is on the staff level, if you tell us it's useless language, then we won't bother put it in there. But from a common standpoint, for what we're trying to do here, it's a no-brainer.
Well, why don't I start with that in the draft ordinance, and then we can always
Okay.
continue the discussion from there.
Sounds good.
So let's talk about fill. So this is specifically about where fill is allowed or not. And then on the next slide, we'll get into the percentage limits. So right now, based on what I heard at the last meeting, agriculture and bona fide farm uses would be exempt from any fill grading requirements. And then I did carry this forward because there was a comment at the last meeting. How do we prevent, someone acting in bad faith from filling land and then selling it to the developer, and it happens to be 4 feet higher? The only way to do that would be through a permit. So again, that's just for consideration. But what will we allow with a floodplain permit? For fill would be residential road fill with proper culvert sizing. That was brought up at the March meeting. Governmental and utility fill, which would include DOT and road construction. And then again, water dependent businesses, similar to what we talked about in the last slide. Prohibited for fill, blanket prohibition, again, similar to last slide, general non-residential, commercial, industrial, and any type of residential dwelling. So looking for feedback on this for just general allowances.
With the exception of cleaning out those drainage ditches for the farmers, I mean, why in the world do they even want to fill? They're just, anything you bring in, it's gonna be
Right.
bad dirt unless you bring in other black dirt from another location that got washed off. So how do they control that, like in this event where a lot of their land got eroded away and washed downstream? Are they, in this situation, would they be able to bring it back to that elevation, but we wouldn't know what that elevation is?
That's exactly right. And how it's written here, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's what's happened with, Helene, because right now the floodplains are unregulated. And I think we had that discussion, that in Transylvania, maybe where there's a floodplain ordinance, they would have to do the no rise certification. We would have to know, the previous elevation where it's being brought to, so we know it's being brought back to what was there, not being elevated.
So my question would be that knowing where it is that something that we have data on through some kind of satellite imagery, or is that going to be up to these farmers to get that topo done before an event to be able to get it back to where it was? If we was to put a no fill on any of this.
I'd have to look for clarification. I mean, there is data that shows,
Within plus or
mean
minus.
elevation above sea level. And I mean, that's reflected in the floodplain maps too. Now they have been updated since, 07. Although there are new ones coming, but yeah, so I mean, elevation data can be, found in certain places. But, if you're talking about 1 foot, 2 foot differences, it's going to be very hard to narrow it down from the staff perspective without putting the burden on an applicant.
Okay. So where you at with that?
It would be nice to somehow come up with a way to make it where you couldn't go fill 10 feet. And then go oopsie doopsie.
Well, the thing is like, if you fill one side, you're just moving that water when it comes down. If it don't wash it out, you're putting it on somebody else. And I don't think that's fair either. So that's my problem with it. You know, we got what we got, you bought what you bought, you know, take your chances with it. It isn't a floodway. But if you fill it up to get yours out of it, you're actually just turning that water on somebody else. And that's what I have a problem with. That they can't control.
So maybe we want to break this out more. Maybe we have agriculture exempt from minor maintenance and land disturbance grading. But maybe we have a definition for a major fill operation that's based on cubic yards, increase in elevation, where that would be regulated and
Right.
require a permit.
Right.
Yeah.
The flood map isn't necessarily specific enough to,
To use,
I mean, if there's a way to say that this is the map, if you want to develop this, we're going to look at the map. And if it's been raised 10 feet from the map, then no. But, right, because let's say in my lower field, which has like 10 feet in the floodplain, if suddenly that becomes 5 feet higher, and I said, well, it's not a floodplain, but the map says it is, we're going to go by the map. Right?
That's correct.
That's something we can do.
Yes.
And that keeps me from filling that land and then saying it's not in a floodplain. Well, yes, it is because it's on the map.
Until an updated map is
Yes.
released.
So we
And then at
actually,
that point, it will no longer be in the floodplain.
it'll be running concurrent with the present day maps.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
they're constantly update.
Mhm.
There lays one right there.
and that's what I was gonna say. So there was a warehouse in Broad Point that developed and it was all floodplain. They filled maybe a quarter of it, put the warehouse on it, and then found out they had to get flood insurance for their warehouse because the insurance company saw their warehouse was in a floodplain and the map was
On the map.
So they did a letter of map revision, and that's what we were notified about.
Mhm.
That would be the only way to get yourself out of the floodplain. So you could throw 4 feet of dirt down, and at the end of the day, I'm still going to be looking at the FEMA regulatory flood insurance rate maps. And unless it's changed, you're still in the floodplain.
There's no way of tracking what changes, is there?
Not without permits.
So when
You mean
but-
just base elevation?
Yeah, so when that map's redone, if suddenly my land's 10 feet higher,
Mm,
I'm no longer in the floodplain.
I
You
think,
compare the two and how'd that happen?
well, I mean, we could look at that because I mean, FEMA's
hold me
developing
accountable
those new
for it.
maps and they fly those planes over with that LiDAR, that laser. So I mean, they are measuring it. But that would be staff basically looking at old maps, new maps, and looking for discrepancies.
Yeah.
Now, again, the floodplain's been unregulated, so I don't, going back, I don't think we could do anything
It would
about
be
it.
from the
here
time
forward.
this went through
Yes.
forward, we can
Mhm.
control it somewhat. Have a better hand on it.
If a person owned a piece of property and they backfilled enough to make that property buildable, and then we had a big flood and it flooded somebody else out downstream, do they have to permit to backfill now?
Currently, no.
No.
Now we've got the moratorium, so if you're in
Oh.
a watershed area, right now, I wouldn't issue a watershed permit for that.
Okay,
But before the floodplain moratorium, our floodplains were unregulated. So
Right.
you could put
well,
dirt.
no, but this is desperately needed because we just saw that situation play out.
So I heard some interest in maybe breaking out the definition of fill for ag. So I'll just go with what I threw out and refine it, but minor maintenance and fill of agricultural land would be allowed, but have a definition for a major fill operation or something like that based on feet added or feet of elevation increased, and that would have standards.
And you'd have to get a permit
Mhm,
for that level.
mhm.
And then you could maybe something about going to the previous floodplain map to compare for that property. And if there's a non-permitted activity that got it out of the floodplain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Michael had to figure out how to write the language
Yeah,
in,
how-
but yeah.
Okay, so I've got good sense on that. Let's talk about how much fill. So here's some examples of what our neighbors do. Town of Fletcher, from the best I could see, they don't have percent fill limits. They rely purely on the no rise certification because at some point you're going to fill so much, you're going to create a rise in floodwaters. So that's their limiting factor. Hendersonville has the strictest. They allow up to 10% of special flood hazard area to be filled. And then Henderson County allows up to 20% in the 100-year floodplain to be filled. And then there was that change in the code, I can't remember if it was a year or 2 years ago, where there can be additional fill with that no rise certification. So you can put additional fill above the 20% in the 100-year floodplain with this special fill permit and no rise certification, or you can also put fill in the floodway with that new process of a special fill permit and no rise engineered certification. Flat Rock, I think may be a good example for us to kind of mirror. They prohibit fill in the special flood hazard area, except for those specific uses: utility, recreational, functionally water dependent fill facilities, stream restoration, etc. But they do require the no rise certification for that. And then Buncombe County, from the best I could tell from my research, they allow fill and use the no rise certification as the limiting factor. So here's a couple examples to consider. So I went with the lower numbers. Let's start with 5% and 10%. So let's say you have a 7.5 acre property in Boylston Highway. You bought it. You need to construct your residential driveway through a floodplain to get up to where your house site's going to be. This was a specific property I picked out, but I didn't want to put the GIS up and call specific properties out. So in this 7.5 acre property, we've got a little under 2.5 acres in the floodplain and floodway. That equates to about 105,000 square feet. So these would be the allowed fill amounts. So 5%, you get about 5,225 square feet of fill area. So again, think about running a driveway with that much base to build upon. 10% would allow a little under 10,500 square feet of fill. So again, just to give a sense of that.
And that
And-
sounds big, but when you get it on the ground, it is not big. It's not a big area when it's out on the ground. You think a lot of these people's houses are 2,500 feet. Yeah, 5% is 2 houses worth. That's not a very long driveway. So just keep all these numbers in relative thinking terms.
10 feet wide, it's 500.
And that's based on a 7.5 acre property. Yeah, you take a regular 1 acre lot, which he may be going there in a minute, but I'm just saying. Ain't seen his notes.
I think the town's new property is a good example too, because obviously we have floodplain area and we're going to be developing it at some point, hopefully. So let's say we want to add fill to do a stream restoration project at the backside of the old dairy property. Now, again, the overall parcel size is actually not what matters. It's just the percent of the floodplain area. But again, that's just to give you a sense of it. So 34 acres for one of the parcels over here. There's about 4.25 acres in the floodplain and floodway. And so here's where your 5% and 10% numbers would come out to. So with 4 and change acres in the floodway, you've got 185,000 square feet. 5% comes out to about 9,250 square feet of fill allowed. And then 10% would be double that. Now, there's going to be another slide that talks about variances, because again, there will be a variance process. It's very common for floodplain ordinances to have a variance process. And I think fill will probably be one of the more common things people seek variances from. Obviously, there's going to be standards for issuing that variance, not having it being a self-created hardship, all that stuff. But a variance would be a means for someone to say, well, my driveway has to get through here. I have no reasonable means of constructing a driveway on 5,000 square feet of land. And then they'd have to make that case to the Board of Adjustment.
But if they subdivide the land and create that parcel, knowing there's no way to get to it except through the floodplain, the variance isn't as, right?
Yeah, the land use variances have different hardship. The standards are different between floodplain and land use variances, but that's still something we could incorporate because again, we're writing this. We're really pioneers with this. There's, to my knowledge, no one in the state of North Carolina doing this. Everyone either goes for the NFIP ordinance or they don't.
Okay.
Um,
So the no rise certification, they can even come and challenge it with a variance as well?
no. That would be, it's only for dimensional requirements, so
Okay.
number requirements. So that's why you see setbacks in zoning so much, or building height or building size. It's only from those numerical amounts. So
Okay.
this, this being a numerical limit, that's where you can vary. You can't have a variance from a larger provision like that.
Okay.
So you could technically do 0% fill and then come in and say that it's a economic hardship on, and get a variance to put your driveway in.
You could, yes, you could. There may be a lot more variances, just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right.
so again, I don't have to have the feedback tonight, but just wanted to give you a sense of these two limits. I mean, do you think I'm right? Or I'm just looking for feedback. Do you think 10% is the number to kind of start with and go from there? Do you feel more comfortable with 5, split the middle? And again, this can always be changed later, but
I'm going with 0.5% to 1.
okay.
Like,
I mean, I'm torn.
I mean, like on your 34 acres for the park, 18,000 square feet, that's basically half an acre, and that's
Mhm.
quite a bit
Yeah.
of property.
And stream bank restoration is really a different case, isn't it? Because you've got the stream bank, it's been destroyed for whatever reason, you got to build it back.
You picked apart my unperfect
He's trying to
example.
pull it off.
Okay, it's not that. I mean, you got a very good example, but
You're correct, yes.
there may be, stream bank restoration could be exempted from it. I mean, got to maintain the stream. But to do something beyond that, then that would be Phil.
I'm just trying to keep thinking that water knows no bounds, so, yeah, at the end of the day, it's just fill and floodway, so.
Yeah. How much does it take to create a rise?
Mhm.
And how much of a rise is a big deal?
Would you like? Would you need a no rise certification, like on the 5% fill on 34 acres? Like, do you think if you filled in 10,000 square feet on the park, would that trigger a rise?
I have no idea.
I tried to do that math a while back, and that's some complicated stuff.
And again, the whole property size is less important. It's really the acreage in the floodplain and floodway, the special flood hazard area.
I see, Miss Britton. I know what you mean, but it gets. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the thing. The 10% ain't really 10%. It's, you're allowed to fill 10% as high as you want.
Right.
That's what kills you.
That's right.
That's where it
But-
gets.
But if
Yeah.
you do raise it 10 feet up, you're gonna have to put culverts in or something in order to keep the water flowing, depending if that's the way water flows.
But I can't build a house over top of culverts.
Right. So you can't build a house on it, you can do a driveway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But then again, is there that much property that they're gonna have to fill for a driveway or have to?
Well, believe it or not, around here, we'll clear more land for driveways than we do for the house site. Think about it.
Because it's not easy to get the driveway in.
If I'm going up through anything, even across the bottom, I can't put it in the bottom land. You take my house, for instance, it ain't a floodplain, but none of that dirt out there will hold a house up because it's been farmed all these years. You'd have to put in an engineered footing system. Well, I took mine all the way up on the hill, but man, my driveway's 700 something feet long. You know, I've got way more driveway than I've got house by a long shot.
Yeah, us too.
So it's just the nature of the beast around here.
So I'm hearing generally, I think some direction we want to be more conservative on this. So you'd be comfortable if I wrote in 5 and we go from there?
I'm not trying to be crass, but I would like to see you personally do 0, because the stricter we are now, then we can go the other, it's easier to go the other way later than it is to claw it back.
And then I'm just asking for clarification. So if DOT came in, was doing a road project, or Buncombe Sewer was doing a new lift station, how do we accommodate that? Do we basically let them do fill only for utility projects?
Cause
or
they're
governmental?
telling me
At the no rise then?
as long as we've got something
Okay.
in there for a few of those situations, cause they're telling me it's gonna happen. I mean, there's just no way around it. You know, just like when they built this bridge out here, you know, and they ramped it up. I mean, that right there is gonna be some portion of a rise, but they couldn't have done it without it.
I just
If
hate
I-
to like overly let them come and put 10 feet of dirt on Hooper Lane for the spirit of making the road higher.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you.
And one concern I would have. Sorry, go ahead, Matt. I know you. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like to me, if I'm hearing this correctly, on slide 7, whereas the Village of Flat Rocks uh, item which fill is prohibited in any special flood hazard area except for utility lines, recreational uses, water dependent. We maybe want to mirror it from that to at least start with. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what we're hearing?
The only thing I would caution is, one thing that we have to keep in mind is the reason why we haven't had any more growth than we have is that we don't have water and sewer. But if that's controlled by somebody else, then they can dictate where growth goes in Mills River. So this may be a way of controlling where growth is going by just blanketing saying they can do, they can fill, they show no rise. So that's just a thought.
I'm not hearing that you're advocating for public utility. Is that correct?
No, I'm not advocating for public utility. I'm just saying, like, if the city of Hendersonville extends
I
the water
understand.
line down and they raise it, then they've opened up a new area, a new corridor that could become developed. They're dictating where we grow.
So you're for it or against it?
Against it.
I'm against saying, I'm with you. I'm just saying, I don't want to do it
Showing a no rise certification on those instances.
for a utility. Because
Oh,
then they
okay.
Well-
show it and then.
We're fixing to get a big one all the way down through here, all the way out to Hendersonville, so we're gonna find out.
Well, but we only go right there. So
Yeah,
I don't know that
Now,
we'll have any of 191 in our flood 100-year in town. I don't think so. It's right,
The bridge structures.
when it's on out, yeah. Okay.
So we'll start with mirroring the flat rock model, and then we can always continue this discussion.
Okay.
So land disturbance and grading, I'll breeze through this pretty quick. Blanket exemption would be agriculture and bona fide farm uses. Allowed with a permit would be residential accessory structures, residential roads, governmental utility, water dependent businesses. So you're seeing the same thing here. Generally okay with that.
What would you need to see for the permitting on those residential accessory structures, roads, government, just to start with, is it gotta be anything official? Or just take your plat and kind of show you where we're disturbing land if we're going to do like a residential house?
I'd have to narrow down
Yeah.
how we want to regulate that. I'm trying to go from the wide funnel down. I think with an accessory structure, I think it can be relatively simple. If you're asking if it has to be prepared by a professional surveyor or something like that, just for a structure permit, I wouldn't think that would be
Okay.
necessary.
That's what I was
Now-
that's what I was worried about.
Yeah, because again, when we get to the NFIP standards of requiring elevation, floodproofing, that's where I think the professional
Okay.
plans come into play.
Okay.
So fuel and petroleum product storage and anchoring. This was one thing we talked about at the last meeting, and this is one where I heard there should be standards and permitting required for this for anyone, including ag and bona fide farms. So basically, if someone's going to be storing fuel and petroleum in a special flood hazard area, any of those uses at the top would need to get a permit from the town. And we would basically use the standards and these NFIP ordinances, but specifically about anchoring petroleum.
We need, I don't know if we can do it here or not, but I mean, there's a lot of other chemicals in those same buildings you're talking about. A lot of sprays, insecticides, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. That's just as hazardous to people downstream, but I don't know if we can control it in this or not, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, this would be related to,
I mean, it gets broke down part per million, but so does that fuel and petroleum. I mean,
it would depend how they're stored. You know, if they're
Yeah.
just tanks on the ground, that's
well,
difficult.
they're gotta be legally in some kind of storage cabinet, locked storage cabinet.
Mm,
That you
understood.
can't get somebody just can't come by at night and
mm.
reach in there and get a jug and take off with it. So if there's any way to figure that out and get it tied in there, I don't think it'd be a bad idea.
To be fuel, petroleum, chemical storage.
Yeah, I think that would cover it. You know, I mean, I hate to put this burden on them, but there's a lot of people lives downstream from here that we could potentially protect.
And then any type of similar storage would be prohibited for all those other prohibited uses.
Well, and if you permit it, you're gonna know where it's at.
Correct. I already covered this, but variances will play a role. Similar like we did for the water supply watershed regulations, the Board of Adjustment would serve as the floodplain review board and hear variance requests. So again, no variance is allowed from the prohibitions from the general blanket standards, but you could for fill for any numerical requirement.
So can we set limits on the variance in the ordinance? So say like if we say 0%, but we can set a cap in the ordinance that if you apply for a variance, it cannot go over X number. So that if somebody comes in here, then there's still,
They know there's a max.
there is a max that they're gonna hit.
Yeah, we can incorporate that.
In that fill 10%, is there a way to put an elevation with that? To say that you can fill no more than 10% of the land, no more than 1 foot above base flood elevation, or up to base flood elevation, or something like that.
Collector has that, I think, don't they? It's like base flood elevation plus 2 feet.
That their freeboard.
Well, that freeboard would be their build height, right?
Yeah, which you can achieve either through fill
Oh, I got,
Okay.
or through
That's it.
piers.
I got you. Okay.
And then we heard that basically we're going to do enforcement and complaints. That's all I have for you. Any other feedback or questions?
Good job. Thanks
Yeah.
for all your work.
Yeah.
We'll get cranking on drafting the ordinance.
Are you excited about being the first person in the state to do this?
It may be the country, so very excited. I'm not joking.
I don't doubt it.
Oh my, we used to avoid
Give
the
me good
4
pictures.
Ds, the dumb, the daring, dangerous, and the different. I'm afraid that maybe, but that's okay.
There could be a future law after you.
Mm.
The Malachek ordinance.
I don't need my name mispronounced more than
Michael's law.
All right. I guess you're doing this next one too, so we'll move on to
Yeah.
the presentation of the land use bill.
And while they're getting set up, I'll just briefly say that this has obviously been a moving target, setting this item up. So before you, we're gonna, even since you got your packet, today is crossover day. So and so that does not necessarily mean that the bills that didn't make crossover are dead in the water. It doesn't mean that the items that were in those bills may not find their way onto other bills. but the presentation that Mike's going to be showing you today is actually as updated as we have as of 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Wow.
So we're to provide you with the best information possible. I will also mention that in the that in some of the items that are going to be before you, I have reached out to Representative Balkum, especially around one of the items that I've shared around Senate Bill 69. We're going to talk more about it now. And I have received word that, today that she is receptive to receiving any kind of feedback or comments that you all provide. So anything that you want to provide tonight, I will take in and you know, make sure that it gets passed along to our representatives at the state level for consideration as we move forward.
I'll be glad to throw something out there when we get to.
So it's been a very active year for land use bills introduced in both bodies. I think it's a little under 24 between both of them. And I'm going to do a quick review of all of these. Some of the ones that did not make crossover, I'll skip over relatively quickly. You'll see this type of red X through it. But I did just want to highlight them because they could all affect Mills River in some way. So this was House Bill 9. This proposed basically limiting any local government from regulating sport shooting ranges and limited how counties could regulate the discharge of firearms. This did not make crossover. And as you can see, in all of these, I have basically a short summary and then the actual history of the bill moving forward. So this one did not have a lot of action and did not make crossover. House Bill 24 was one of the statewide bills to do the downzoning fix to restore the downzoning authority for local governments across the state. This one did move a little bit towards the end, but did not make crossover. We have our local bill from Representative Balkum restoring downzoning authority for Henderson County, specifically only for farmland and floodplain uses. That one was introduced, did not have a lot of action, did not make crossover. House Bill 369 is a parking lot reform and modernization. It really basically strips local governments from regulating off-street parking, number of spaces, parking space size, etc. Again, had some movement towards the end before crossover, but did not make it to the other body. This was actually sponsored by Representative Balkum. It's the Home-Based Business Fairness Act, and basically it has a definition for no impact home-based businesses and then prohibits local governments from regulating them, requiring any type of special permit, etc. This did make crossover, has had a few committee substitutes, and I believe was passed, 114-1. So had support from both parties in the House. That actually I think is a good fit for Mills River because we do have a lot of folks, with home-based businesses that are concerned about maintaining those on their property. House Bill 627 was about accessory dwelling units and basically would require every local government to permit one ADU or accessory dwelling unit for every single family home in a residential zoning district. You could build the ADU before or after your house is built. Again, had a little bit of activity towards the end and did not make crossover. House Bill 661 would basically limit cities from requiring different street standards beyond NCDOT. That did not have a lot of action, did not make crossover. This is a big one I'll spend a few minutes on. House Bill 765. It did not make crossover, but it had activity up until yesterday, I think. It's changed a number of times too. I think this is the third version we've seen. Originally, this one was very concerning because it had a minimum residential density for any city, and I can't remember the limit. I think it was under 20,000 of 4 units an acre. So this would mandate, in its former version, 4 units an acre anywhere in Mills River, period. That was changed. And I'm going to go through some of the highlights of the current one, because again, there's been a lot of activity with this one, and I think some of these items could still come up and make their way into another bill. One thing it does is it narrows local government authority. There's new language that says you can only do what is expressly stated in the statutes. Now, that's always been the general interpretation, but there's also been the interpretation there's some leeway for local governments to regulate things between the lines. If that language is included, that will no longer be the case. It removes wording regarding municipal police power for land use authority. So it removes language about, you hear us talk about protecting the public health, safety, and welfare, and it changes all that language to the actual and legitimate needs of the community. So rezoning decisions, any zoning amendment decision would have to be supported by facts that the decision is within the best interest, actual and legitimate needs of the community.
Mike, and if I may
Yes.
interrupt real quick, there are no definitions of what actual and legitimate are within that. I don't believe so. I would have to go back and look,
I'd
but
have to double check.
I do not hold me to it, but I do not believe that there is a definition within that of what actual and legitimate needs of the community is defined as.
I bet you the definition will be to protect public health, safety.
Most likely,
Potentially.
and some other off the wall, something or other.
Vested rights are proposed to be extended in this bill. So right now, you get vested rights for an issued permit for 2 years. That's why subdivision approvals for the town last 2 years. That would be proposed to change to 5 years. There would be new time limits for local development approvals. Something similar has already been applied to building permits. This is the first time it would be applied to zoning. So basically, staff would have 14 days for a completeness review and then 90 days for approval or denial. Now, that can be extended as long as the applicant agrees to it. But if you fail to meet the timeline, you must issue the approval at the applicant's request. There's limitations on what can be applied in a conditional zoning district. So again, since that language I first talked about at the beginning basically says municipalities can only do what's expressly stated in the statutes, we now can't negotiate with a conditional zoning applicant requesting something not allowed in the statutes. We talked about that parking bill previously. It looks like some of that language made it in here. There is now no again, per this bill that didn't make crossover, no regulation of off-street parking by local governments. Standards for driveways and roads can't be stricter than NCDOT standards. I think we saw that language in another bill that didn't make crossover. This is one that is only in this bill. Any local government cannot require a sidewalk for residential, commercial, or school properties unless it connects to an existing sidewalk or if a connection is going to be built by the local government within the next 2 years. Local governments have to support zoning decisions by demonstrating a rational and substantial relationship between the amendment, the comp plan, and the actual and legitimate needs of the community. And they're suggesting developing findings of facts for that. So we're seeing a potential transition from a pure legislative zoning decision inching a little bit towards quasi-judicial. So again, supporting zoning decisions with facts, not just opinions, preferences, and based on our plans. Residential zoning districts shall be classified on density, not minimum lot size. MR30 probably wouldn't change because the minimum lot size is the density, but that would require us to classify them all that way. There is still in this bill minimum density of 4 units an acre, but it was changed and now is only for cities 55,000 in population or more. Again, in the previous version, Mills River would have been caught up in that. There are also time limits for rezoning reviews. This could be impactful because it could limit how long planning board has to do a review and recommendation. So again, 14 calendar days for completeness review, just like for the administrative decisions, and 90 days for the actual decision, unless the applicant agrees to extend it. And if you don't meet the timeline, it's constituted as approval. Stripping subdivision review authority away from any type of governing board or committee and removing, putting it squarely with staff. So administrative approvals only for subdivisions. And because of that, subdivision appeals would then just become administrative appeals versus like if the planning board or governing board has an appeal, it would be to court of law, most likely. So again, that's 765. I wanted to run through all that just because I think it's relatively impactful. It was the one we were most concerned about previously. and there's been some major changes with it.
And just for one point of clarification, just for the record, is there is a definition for that within there. To Mike's point, you were correct, and the bona fide necessity requirement is the term, that the phrase that they use within that, but there is still, in my opinion, some ambiguity obviously around what those terms would look like for moving forward. But I do just want to stress what Mike mentioned, that it is an omnibus bill. So for those that are listening and those in the room, those are large scale bills, right? There are many sections that are a part of something dealing with, in this case, land use. And so there is an opportunity for those sections individual to find their ways into other places, because they are basically a conglomeration of different items into one larger bill.
House Bill 876, again, we already kind of covered this in the one we just reviewed, but had specific provisions for development application review time limits, although much shorter than what was in House Bill 765. House Bill 913, titled Liability, Unfair and Deceptive Development Actions, went forward. This allows litigants to collect attorney's fees, and I believe includes punitive damages, and those can be awarded up to 10 times the actual damages. This one has had a lot of activity and did make it through to the other body. So again, this one basically targets or states that local government decision makers, if they intentionally delayed a decision, acted in bad faith, if there was an intentional misrepresentation or bad actor in that decision, the local government could be sued, and you can not only get attorney's fees, but damages, and possibly 10 times the actual damages. House Bill 1009 prohibits any type of extraterritorial jurisdiction. Town of Mills River does not have that, but this one did not make crossover. Now to the Senate bills. So this is one we'll spend a minute or two on. Senate Bill 69. We just found out about this 2 days ago, I believe. Yeah, was it yesterday? Okay. So this is titled the Henderson County Local Omnibus. Now, Mills River was not named in this because primarily the original bill language was just dealing with city utilities and requiring annexation for city utilities, items like that. Here's a summary what's in the current version. So Hendersonville must deliver utility services equally within and outside their municipal limits and can't demand annexation for public utilities. This was just written in yesterday. The town of Mills River may adopt a UDO, notwithstanding the downzoning prohibition, but it states adoption of the UDO shall occur on or before October 1st. We're not projected to get it before y'all for adoption until I believe it's June or July 26. Henderson County, I believe, is also going through their UDO, so they have an exemption in here, also adopting that UDO by October 1st, 25. No municipality in Henderson County can exercise any ETJ authority. Again, doesn't impact us because we don't have it. But for Hendersonville, Fletcher, Laurel Park has a very small ETJ, but those will all be impacts to them. And then any municipal annexation of property, even if it's done voluntarily, like the one we saw a year or so ago, has to receive approval from the County Board of Commissioners to rezone it to a municipal zoning district. So even though the town of Mills River may have an applicant who wants to join in our town, we would be unable to rezone it to Mills River zoning district and apply our regulations without concurrence with the Board of Commissioners. Here's the history on it. Again, you can see most of the movement in the committee substitute happened in the last 2 days. And then it did make it over to the other body, to the House. Senate Bill 137 was our local bill for the downzoning exemption. Again, sponsored by Senator Moffett, specifically for farmland preservation reasons. No real activity there, did not make crossover. I'm not going to go through all this, but Senate Bill 257, very, very, very long bill because it's the Appropriations Act, has a few land use things in it. It just talks about allowing schools either by right or through special use permit in any commercial zoning district, and talks a little bit about vested rights. There is some language about abolishing the ETJs in there as well, but again, that doesn't affect Mills River. Obviously, a lot of amendments and action on that one with it being an appropriations bill. Senate Bill 291, regulation of short-term rentals, sponsored by Senator Moffett. This one did not make crossover, did not have a lot of activity. Basically would not allow local governments to regulate short-term rentals. The town of Mills River chooses to not regulate them currently. Senate Bill 419 was the blanket downzoning fix, quote unquote, for the state, put forth in the Senate. That one did not have a lot of activity and did not make crossover. Senate Bill 493, titled Land Use Clarifications and Changes. This did make crossover. And you can see has some of that similar language in the Appropriations Act. So local governments allowing by right or special use permits, schools and commercial districts. And then there's some language about if a parcel is split between jurisdictions, there's specific provisions about which jurisdictions zoning or land development regulations would apply, and also removing ETJ. Here's the activity on that. Again, most of the activity happening in the last couple of days. Senate Bill 495 was another accessory dwelling unit one, also sponsored by Senator Moffett. This one would require an accessory dwelling unit for every single family home. And again, could be constructed before or after the home is built. That did not make crossover. Senate Bill 497, expand middle housing, also sponsored by Senator Moffett, would basically require, I believe, by right, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, fiveplexes, and sixplexes in residential zoning districts. That did not have a lot of activity and did not make crossover. Senate Bill 499, allow housing near jobs, also sponsored by Senator Moffett, would allow residential uses in commercial zoning districts that have office and retail uses. Very little activity, did not make crossover. This one I'll spend a few minutes on. Senate Bill 587, clarify non-conforming uses. So if you remember from the downzoning prohibition in the session law, it actually expanded the definition of a downzoning to include when a local government creates any type of non-conformity, whether that be use, structure, lot size, etc. So right now, the way this is written, it says any amendment to a zoning and land regulation is not applicable and not enforceable against a non-conforming property or a property that's made non-conforming through that amendment unless written consent is received. It allows non-conformities to go in a discontinued state from 6 months to 24 months. So good example is the Shade Tree Garage. They had a very quick transition relatively between owners because I've let them know if you discontinue this use for 6 months, it's not going to be allowed anymore. That's not allowed in that zoning district. This bill would change that to a 2-year period. And then there is a kind of fix for the local government downzoning prohibition. So it allows local governments to downzone and basically removes the language from the session law that we wouldn't be creating non-conformities. We wouldn't be downzoning just by creating non-conformities. But at the same hand, if you go back to the top bullet, any amendment to a zoning rule that creates a non-conformity is not applicable unless written consent is received. So we can downzone, but we can't downzone properties we could make non-conforming without written consent. There's the activity on that, again, mostly in the last week. Here's another one, Senate Bill 639. This one's actually positive. The North Carolina Farm Act of 25, sponsored by Senator Moffett. This would require a 100-foot buffer to be provided by any development abutting a farm that has a conservation easement on it. It also has language that says permits for special uses could be denied on the basis that they would have an adverse impact on agricultural production in a neighboring property, but you couldn't do that for residential projects. Senate Bill 688, local government land use reform, sponsored by Senator Moffett. A lot of the language we see in these other bills, this one did not make crossover. Not a lot of activity. Another one by Senator Moffett, basically saying no local government could have an environmental regulation in excess or with more requirements than state or federal law. That did not make crossover. Senate Bill 736, the Foundation Act, building North Carolina's housing future. This one would allow one attached and one detached accessory dwelling unit for every house. So 2 ADUs for one home. There were a number of other provisions about review time limits for affordable developments, et cetera. That did not make crossover. And we got to that. Yeah. sorry.
Golly.
Good job. So the ones that's passed our law, in my understanding,
So they've not passed, they've just made it into the opposite chamber. So the
Okay.
House bills have been sent to the Senate bills have been
Okay.
sent to the House.
I understand.
Which is, as a reminder, with Senate Bill 69, it's now over in the House, which is why I referenced Representative Balkum at that time. So there are still opportunities for council, if you so choose, so desire, to continue the conversation with our state legislators around any and all bills, because it's just going through basically a similar process on the other side in case, potential amendments can be added or removed based off of that chamber's decision making.
Well, you and Brian was both with me. I mean, somewhere or another, Mr. Moffett has got his dates messed up. We told him straight out, we had just got started on this UDO. Did we need to stop? Did we need, I think he's got our dates mixed up when we started talking about trying to get the rural residential on 280 back in October. And but then I see where he's put in for Henderson counties is they got to have theirs done by October 1st, 2025. So I think he thinks we're playing on the same timeline. But that didn't even make crossover though, did it? Or did it? It
Yes,
did.
it did.
So see, we need to get a hold of Balkum and see if we can get that thing adjusted, the dates on it adjusted for us on our, y'all agree?
Mm-hmm.
On the Mills River part, there's no way we can have that done by October
And I've already
1st.
spoken to Chad, and that's correct.
Okay.
It will not be ready.
No.
Based off of the conversation, a recommendation or a thought for the council that there are two areas with that bill that were slightly concerning to staff. The first one is the October 1st deadline that is requesting from our legislators to move that back to July 2026 to allow us that full time in order to get that back. And then the other one is to clarify the language in the section or the paragraph above that because that does read as if we've presented to you at the UDO, not that we've kicked off and had the preliminary discussion in October. And so adding that language in there would be a recommendation for you to consider.
So by consensus, can we get the ball rolling on that as early as tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
will.
definitely get on that. I know we don't by motion in the business meeting, but that needs attention immediately. Because if we could get that through, that would really help us. I wouldn't feel like we're wasting this $180,000 plus on this UDO. And make sure, them numbers get thrown out there that what we're spending on this, is going to be of no use to us if we can't get this accommodated somehow.
Understood. This is also an opportunity, I'm not recommending one way or the other, but for council to consider if there are any other additional items for future agendas for us to bring forward based off of the information presented before you. And I would say specifically regarding
These
the land
bills,
use bills. There are certain actions that, council may consider if you so choose.
I would just say anything that's, as major as these are, be it land use or just you know, budget requirements or anything. Council should know about them because they're hard to, understand to start with, you know. I don't know if everybody gets the league's emails or not, like I do, and you go down and read them, you know, you can get the gist of what it is, but I usually still have to call and find out exactly if I know what I'm talking about or not before I go to yelling about it. But, yeah, I think if there's anything serious, yeah, bring it to our attention in a meeting platform and we'll make something happen with it.
And I think it's clear that there's a general direction at the state level
Yeah.
that they're wanting to strip power from municipalities and local governments. So you know, if that's the case, as a resident, I'd much rather come see 5 people and give them my opinion a mile from my house
Mhm.
than drive all the way to Raleigh to give 200 people or whatever my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that that's the direction that they're taking. And I think it's going to be super important for us moving forward to make sure that we are proactively engaged with our representatives. It's obvious they're not coming to us. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, trust me, yeah. Matt got a little taste of it Saturday up at the Mills River Day. But I'm not bashful. I mean, I went down and I spoke with them and, you know, I ain't heard a word out of them. So, you know, so I threw her under the bus on the stage, and then when I met her going on stage and asked her what she planned to do about any of this, she acted like she really didn't even know much about it, to be honest with you. She said, "What bill are you talking about?" I said, 765. She goes, "What's it got in it?" And I hope you're watching. That's the very word she told me. He was standing right there. You know, but that's, no, I don't like it. Still don't like it. I really don't know what this is all about. And if any of them could step up the plate and tell us what it's all about, it might be helpful. I mean, if we're trying to protect us from our own selves, so be it. But if it's something major's going on here on the state level, something major, and I think the whole general public needs to know that. Anytime you throw out 4 units per acre and it's a statewide rule, depending on the population of the little town or whatever, that's big business. Somebody's gonna get their pockets padded. And it ain't gonna be us. Wouldn't want it if I got it that way. So there you have it. So think about that as you vote next time. I will.
Primary season coming up.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Anything else? Anything you don't see on a future agenda that will, other than this? Nothing. Well, if nothing's, we'll make a motion to adjourn our business portion.
make a motion to adjourn our business portion.
Brian,
Second.
Jeff, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Nope.